In the trial, the defendants are in court with their lawyers. The people are represented, and we're ready to resume. Welcome back. Which matters do counsel wish to proceed with first here?
Your Honor, I think that we'd like to proceed with the people's motion to eliminate as to witness number. The first witness for today was this Pamela LiCausi.
Correct.
And also this last witness for today, Pat Stevens. And then I also wanted to discuss Friday's witness, Janet Zlotolow.
Well, with regard to Pat Stevens, we will not be calling.
Oh, well, then we don't have to worry about
We don't
that.
have to worry about it.
At all, or just today?
At all. Well, possibly three brothers, but it's not going to be in our case.
Okay.
Then do you want to remark about witness LiCausi, L-I-C-O-U-S-I? Well, all I know is how it's spelled here.
Okay.
Yes.
And then also I thought as long as we have the time that we should talk about the Friday witness, which is I believe a teacher from Princeton Day School. We don't have any reports from that teacher, but.
That's Janet Zlotolow?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, well, let's first focus on the witnesses for today then. The only one that you want to address is Pamela LiCausi.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe perhaps the defense would like to make an offer of proof so that I'm not addressing issues that won't be raised. I mean, I think that she's going to be a character witness.
As I recall, Mr. Burt's offer of proof last time we spoke, which was Monday, he indicated he would call the witness and elicit from her opinion as to Dr. Oziel's character trait for honesty, veracity, and integrity.
Yes. And in that regard, it appears that the report has a copy of the statement, correct?
You gave it to me, yes.
On page 2 of the statement, in the first full paragraph that starts with Alyssa was hired by Klein on 4/3/87, there is an incident recounted in which her employer was admitted to the hospital, and her employer told her that he was under the impression that Dr. Oziel had admitted him to the hospital, and she countered with the fact that this was not true. And so this appears to be a hearsay statement from her employer to her that would therefore cause her to conclude that Dr. Oziel was lying. But in that regard, it appears that it is somewhat unreliable because it's not Dr. Oziel telling her this, it was her employer. And as far as her other impressions of Dr. Oziel, it appears that Dr. Oziel was in partnership with a man who had a fairly severe alcohol problem, and then to get into the basis of her opinion, it appears, first of all, it appears that this is not enough for her to go on to make a conclusion, and that perhaps the business failing could be partly attributable to her employer's alcoholism. And in addition, it appears that Dr. Oziel said bad things about her employer, but he said them in front of her employer. So I don't know that that has anything to do with honesty and veracity, especially if he's saying these things to the person's face. So I don't know how the information contained in this report substantiates her opinion as to his honesty and veracity.
All right, your position is that there has been an insufficient showing by the defense of a foundation for any opinion that she might offer. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, and what is your response?
I'm prepared to go forward with an offer of proof, Your Honor, as to the foundation for her, not only her opinion, but also a foundation that testifies to his reputation among Dr. Oziel's business associates for truth and veracity. The foundation for the opinion and the foundation for her ability to testify about reputation is not only her observation of the interaction between Oziel and her boss, but also this woman was an office manager in an office where there were a number of employees, a number of business associates who interacted with Dr. Oziel. And this woman, for a long period of time, had the opportunity to observe Dr. Oziel relate not only to her boss, but also relate to a number of other individuals, both within and outside the group of business associates that she was the office manager of. So it's not simply her interaction with the boss that forms the basis of this opinion. It goes much beyond that, and as I say, I'm prepared to call the witness and go question and answer to elicit that foundation.
Well, let us do that then, rather than have further discussion, just have her testify and see.
All right.
If we can proceed that way. Face the court clerk, please, over here, and she'll give you the oath.
Yes, I did.
Tell us your full name and spell your last name.
Pamela LiCausi. My last name is spelled L-I, capital C-A-U-S-I.
Ms. LiCausi, did you work for an individual named Richard Klein back in 1987?
Yes,
And did Richard Klein had a group called Intercontinental Group? Was that
Yes.
the name of the business?
yes it was.
What was your role in that business?
I was the executive assistant, secretarial, among other things.
And what were your duties and responsibilities?
I interacted with the clients, and I also helped get new clients. Basically, I did everything from secretarial, computers, took care of flight arrangements, arranged meetings, and was involved with all meetings, all planning.
And how many employees were involved in Mr. Klein's group?
There was about 9 of us.
And did you, on a certain date, come to know a person named L. Jerome Oziel?
Yes.
Could you tell us how you came to know him?
Well, when I first started working there, like the first day, Richard mentioned that this was his friend, but also a psychiatrist too, and that he would be calling in and to always take his phone calls, and that I would be seeing this particular person often.
And did you, in fact, come to see him often?
Yes, I did.
Did you see him in person
Yes.
and also talk to him numerous times on the telephone?
Yes.
Did you see him interacting with your boss, Mr. Klein?
Yes.
And could you tell us how frequently you saw that take place?
So frequently I couldn't even count. I mean, it was like a everyday occurrence or every other day.
And would you personally attend meetings where Dr. Oziel was present with your boss?
Yes.
And how frequently would that take place?
Meetings, maybe once a week, formal meetings.
And would these meetings involve Dr. Oziel interacting with other people beside Richard Klein?
Yes.
Who would he be interacting with that you were able to observe?
There was a man named Jeff Seaman, Gina Zacchia, another fellow named Jeff, I can't recall his last name, Todd Marshall. Those are the only ones I can recall right now.
And for what period of time did you have this contact with Dr. Oziel?
For almost a year.
So in 1987 is when it began, and then you worked there for approximately a year.
Yes.
And during that whole period of time, was your contact with Dr. Oziel on a frequent basis?
Yes.
And did he actually have a space there in your office?
Yes. When they started the new business, not at first, when they started the new Automax business.
Automax was a business that Richard Klein and Dr. Oziel had formed together?
Well, Richard came up with the concept, and then Mr. Oziel came in after that.
And Mr. Oziel actually moved into the office?
He didn't. He still kept his other private office in Beverly Hills because he is a psychiatrist. But the people that were involved with Automax were saying you have to cut ties with all of that if you're going to totally come on board here. So for a while he had two things going, and there was a little squabbling in regards to that. And finally they made some kind of contract where he'd get more money than he thought he was going to get. And then he went ahead and said, okay, he left his patients.
Then he actually came into your office?
Yes.
And during the time after and even before that he came into your office, did you see him in situations where he would make statements to certain people and then directly contradictory statements to other people?
Yes.
And did that occur frequently?
All the time.
And did there come a time when your boss, Richard Klein, was hospitalized?
Yes.
Was that in 1988?
Yes.
And after he was hospitalized, after he got out of the hospital, was he forced out of his office by Jerry Oziel?
During the period that Richard was in the hospital, gave Jerry Oziel more opportunity to backstab him, to play him down, to say bad things about Richard. He got more manipulating control over the whole situation, totally bad-mouthed Richard, and he's supposedly his best friend and his psychiatrist.
And you were in the office observing this take place while your boss was in the hospital,
right? Correct.
Now, after your boss got out of the hospital, did Mr. Oziel remain with Richard Klein in the same office, or was there a parting of the ways?
There was a parting of the ways. Everything was kind of hectic. The excuse, Jerry had turned almost everyone against Richard, all of his employees that he had for a long time, and the excuse that they gave was that the Automax was going to become so big that this particular building we were in wasn't going to be able to fit everyone, so they went and found another location.
And did Dr. Oziel take a certain number of Richard Klein's employees with him?
Yes, he did.
And did you continue to communicate with those employees who you had worked with previously about Dr. Oziel's exploits?
Yes.
And did you continue to communicate with Richard Klein about Dr. Oziel and his involvement with your boss right up until last year when your boss died?
Yes.
And based on that length of time, did you form an opinion about Dr. Oziel's character for honesty or lack thereof?
Yes, I have.
And what is your opinion?
My opinion, after working with him for 1 year and seeing how he acts, my opinion about Dr. Oziel is that he is greedy, malicious, deceitful. He preys, manipulates, and brainwashes vulnerable people. He has no ethics, no morals. He's a professional liar. He makes David Koresh look like a saint. He's scary. He really scares me.
And would it be fair to say, based on what you just said, that your opinion is that he is a dishonest person?
Very dishonest.
And do you also, based on your contact with him and talking to other people who know him within his circle of friends, are you able to testify what his reputation is for honesty or the lack of honesty in his business circle of friends?
Yes, I'm able to do that.
What is his reputation?
His reputation is one for being a snake, backstabber, liar. Can't trust him.
Thank you. That's all I have. That would be the offer of proof, Ron.
Cross-examination?
Yes. Emmanuel Zlotolow? LiCausi?
Yes.
With whom have you spoken about Dr. Oziel's reputation?
Pardon me?
With whom have you spoken about Dr. Oziel's reputation for these character traits that you just told us about?
Richard Klein.
Who else?
Gina Zacchia. This other person named Jeff that I can't recall his last name. There was Karen.
Were these all people that were involved in Mr. Klein's original business?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, Mr. Klein's original business, did it fall apart or did it go broke or what happened to
Well,
it?
the tax laws changed, and you couldn't get the same kind of tax benefit for equipment leasing, so they went on to other ventures.
So what happened to the business that you were originally hired to work for?
Well, it was still ongoing because we still had clients involved, and you couldn't just stop it. You know, we had to wrap things up, and still to this day, some people do get involved, but the tax benefit is not as great as it used to be.
Did the business begin to lose money after the tax laws changed?
Yeah, it wasn't as profitable.
Okay, did it begin to lose money, though? There's a difference between making a profit.
I wasn't involved with the accounting department, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly yes or no.
Now, the people that you then have spoken to about Dr. Oziel's reputation for honesty are all people who were originally involved with you and Mr. Klein in this business of his.
Yes.
And you haven't spoken to anyone outside of this particular business, is that correct?
Well, I've seen the TV, and yeah, I've discussed it. When I first saw this on TV, I was shocked when I found out Jerry Oziel was the physician for these boys, because I thought, oh, those poor guys, because I know how he is.
All right. So you haven't spoken to anyone else about his reputation?
Yes, I have.
Well, people who know him?
No.
All right. So the only people that you've spoken to about his reputation who knew him were these people that you've listed: Richard Klein, Gina, Zakia, Jeff, and Karen.
Also, Elmer and Helen Klein, Richard's parents.
Now, Mr. Klein had a drinking problem, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
And when he was hospitalized, that was for hepatitis, correct?
Yes.
Which is a liver ailment.
Yes.
And now the business that you originally were hired to work for, you said there were 9 employees. Were those employees that you supervised?
No, actually everybody had their own job.
All right, and then after the tax law changed and the business became less profitable, it was at that time that Mr. Klein and Dr. Oziel went into the Automax business. Is that correct?
Not at the exact time. The tax laws had changed in the previous year, and they were still working with people. You couldn't just cut people off like that. So business was still going on, and then they created Automax at the same time.
Okay. Was Automax ever a profitable business?
Yes.
And did Mr. Klein share in those profits?
I never saw him, get handed a check or anything, but I would assume so, yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that when Mr. Klein went to the hospital, that it was at that time that Dr. Oziel forced him out. Could you explain exactly how that occurred?
While Richard was in the hospital, I was going back and forth to the hospital, but Jerry would say bad things about Richard, and he would start getting everybody on Jerry's side, talking about can I say profanities? Saying he was an ass.
No need to do that,
okay.
no.
All right. He would say awful things about him and turning all the other employees against Richard, and Richard's totally defenseless in the hospital. And by the time Richard got out of the hospital, boom, Jerry had already convinced everybody to move into this other place. So,
at that time, was Mr. Klein then forced out of Automax?
Pushed out, yeah.
All right. Now, was he a good businessman, Mr. Klein?
Absolutely.
How often would he show up at work inebriated?
I don't know.
Was
Usually at the end of the day is when it seemed like he would have a cocktail, have wine or something.
Was he inebriated almost every day at work?
Frequently. I wouldn't say every day.
Okay. And when you left, why is it you left?
It was just, everything was too much. I was like Richard's confidant. I was almost his mother, his secretary, his psychiatrist. I just took care of everything. And when he was in the hospital, his parents came out for like 3 weeks. I went out to dinner with them every single night. Just got to the point where there was too much. It was too much for me to handle. Trying to protect this man against Jerry, actually. I was turning into like the codependent type thing. I thought,
All right, so you left because Mr. Klein was basically too needy. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, well, just the pressure was too much.
And so you at that time were protecting him, is that correct?
Yes, that's just the way I am with all my friends and family and people I care about.
He was your employer?
Yes.
And how old a person was he during this period of time?
How old was he?
Yeah.
About 45.
Okay, thank you.
Any redirect.
During the time that you knew Dr. Oziel, he never hit on you sexually?
No.
You're not,
Well, he's kind of flirtatious, though.
but
Tried to be.
You're not in the category of a jilted lover who has
No.
a grudge against Dr. Oziel?
Mm-mm. No,
Never slept with him or anything?
absolutely not.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you may step down.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Qunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Qunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Qunol, the brand I trust.
I had some law that I wanted to cite to the court.
Yes.
In support of this witness's opinion. First of all, Your Honor, the testimony I don't think would be as detailed as the offer of proof I wanted to give the court the full extent of her knowledge. But I think that
What about the extent of her opinion?
the opinion would be limited to, in very much the same way that Ms. McPhee's opinion would be limited. That is, she would testify. I would ask her if she had an opinion as to his honesty or lack thereof. She would say yes. And then I would seek to elicit that she believed that Dr. Oziel is a very dishonest person, almost the same opinion that Ms. McPhee gave. And I would exclude her characterizations of him if the court so ruled, that the David Koresh analogy and things that did not relate to honesty or the lack thereof.
All right, you had some authorities you wanted to cite to the court.
I was going to ask the court to take a look at the McAlpin case, People versus McAlpin, MCALPIN, just 53 Cal 3rd, 1289. And the issue is a little bit different, but I think it's analogous, and if anything, our case is stronger. And in that case, the defendant was trying to put out character witnesses to prove, lay character witnesses to prove that he was not a sexual deviant. It's a child molestation case. And he called in support of that theory a woman who he had dated for a mere 6 months, sometime in the past. The opinion does not indicate when. But the period of the woman's relationship with the defendant was for a period of 6 months. And during that 6-month period of time, the woman that he dated had a child, and the woman got to see the defendant interact with her minor child. And based on that interaction with that one child, the defendant offered an opinion by that witness, a lay opinion that the defendant was not a sexual deviant. And the trial court excluded it on 352 grounds, and also that it was improper opinion. He also offered reputation along the same lines, reputation evidence. And the Supreme Court held that that was error to exclude that testimony. First of all, that it was proper lay opinion, that a foundation had been laid for the introduction of a lay opinion based on the extent of what the court called the long-term relationship. And second of all, on the 352 issue, the court said that since the witness's testimony would not take a lengthy period of time, and since the opinion was pro-offered on a important issue in the case, that it was an abuse of discretion under Evidence Code Section 352 to exclude it. We offer this witness's opinion as corroborative of Ms. McPhee's testimony, and I don't think it's cumulative, because the position with respect to Ms. McPhee is that she has an obvious, or had an obvious axe to grind with respect to Dr. Oziel. And their position with respect to Ms. McPhee was because she knew him so well that she was biased in her assessment of his honesty or lack thereof. And this witness is not subject to that same analysis. So I don't think it's a cumulative opinion. And second of all, I think unlike other types of evidence, reputation evidence and opinion evidence to a certain extent has to be cumulative, because otherwise the jury gets the impression that the defendant searched the world and found the one person that hated the witness, and that there is not support for other people saying that his reputation for truth or veracity is bad. And remember, when we discussed this issue concerning Ms. McPhee, the court inquired, is this the only person in the world, in the United States and in California, that the defense could dig up to attack Dr. Oziel's character? And I think that's a very reasonable inquiry, and one that the jury's likely to have as well. So I think it's necessary to cooperate with the testimony of this witness. And I think
My inquiry was made for a different reason.
I understand, but I think from a jury analysis standpoint, it would be quite reasonable for the jury to speculate or inquire, how come they only found one person? If this person is such an awful liar, how come more people didn't come forward to testify? This witness's testimony, Ms. McPhee's testimony, took 6 minutes in length, and I expect that this witness's testimony will take even less time.
And what is the people's response?
The people's response is that under 352 of the evidence code that this should be excluded. It appears that there may have been just cause for Dr. Oziel to have business disputes with Mr. Klein from the report that we've given to the court. The second to last sentence on the first page is slightly impeaching of her testimony, which is that Richard Klein was almost always inebriated. Because of that, it appears that that there is more here in this dispute than just raw dishonesty on the part of Dr. Oziel, but that there was another side to the story. And if she is permitted to testify, the people should be permitted to get into the fact that she was being loyal to a 45-year-old businessman who was almost always inebriated, who she then felt Dr. Oziel had taken advantage of. But I don't think that, considering who she's talked to about his reputation, that is particularly reliable. Those are people who were in this particular business that seems to have fallen apart, partly due to the fact of Mr. Klein's inebriation. And so it doesn't appear that her testimony is based on very reliable information. And for that reason, it should be excluded.
Well, without reviewing again the McAlpin case, which I am familiar with, this entire subject of opinion evidence in regards to character traits relating to honesty and veracity is an issue that occasionally arises during trials. It's not one that occurs in each and every trial. It is overall a rather rare occurrence that character evidence is introduced in regards to witnesses called by either side. The test really in regards to the foundation for the admissibility of such evidence is the extent of acquaintanceship, depth of relationship that is the basis for any opinions. The subject has been discussed in some of the literature in the field. Jefferson, in his bench book, refers to a case where there was a 1 month relationship and concluded then the appellate court concluded that case, in that case, the 1 month relationship was insufficient foundation. Jefferson goes on to discuss what length of time would be sufficient and suggests that a year would certainly be a sufficient amount of time, depending on the circumstances, obviously. The prosecution basically is arguing that the witness has some motive, some reason to form negative opinions about Dr. Oziel, and because of that, should not be permitted to testify about the opinion itself. As the defense has argued previously on this subject, if there were witnesses who only thought good things and had good experiences with the witness sought to be impeached, the party seeking to do the impeachment would not have any witnesses available to do that. Obviously, the people who have negative things to say about a witness or people who have had negative experiences with that witness and don't like the witness and are willing to take the witness stand and attack the character of the witness. So that's a part of the process of receipt of evidence such as this, character evidence, attacking the credibility of a witness. That by itself should not exclude the testimony of the witness. Other factors relating to the testimony of Ms. McPhee caused the court to exercise its statutory discretion as spelled out in Section 352 of the Evidence Code to exclude the substantive portion of her testimony that had been offered by the defense. And the court at that time ruled that the nature of that evidence, whatever probative value it had, was substantially outweighed by its probability of confusion of issues, necessitation of undue consumption of time, and a substantial danger of prejudice and misleading of the jury. In this situation, the defense is not seeking to introduce the underlying relationship this witness had with Dr. Oziel or any of the other factors that gave rise to her opinion, just offering the opinion itself. And based upon the length of that relationship, although there does appear to be some areas of hearsay that relate to things other people told her, she's indicated that she had weekly contact with Oziel and heard him on numerous occasions make contradictory statements about the same subject. So she does have a specific basis for such an opinion. And the court will permit that testimony edited down to the specifics of just does she have an opinion as to his character trait for honesty or veracity, and is that a good or bad character, and nothing further as far as the recitation that the witness made during her testimony, which would be totally inadmissible in this trial based upon what is being offered by the defense as to the character. I don't believe the defense has established its foundational basis for reputation evidence here because of the type of individuals that have been referred to and the nature of the relationship. I don't find that is the type of evidence that is truly reputation evidence, and the court would preclude that evidence, but will permit the testimony regarding the opinion.
Not Mr. Klein's. I don't see the relevance of asking whether the Mr. Klein was inebriated.
Well, the only reason I could see for asking any such questions would relate to any bias the witness has based upon her relationship with Mr. Klein and her belief that he was mistreated by Dr. Oziel, and that is the genesis of her hatred of Dr. Oziel and the reason why she's testifying as she is. But again, I'm not ruling on what doors would be opened or what doors would not. I have no way of knowing until the questions are asked. All right, anything else before let's first let the jury in. We have a jury outside, so let's let them in to go into the jury room, and then we'll hear from counsel again. Take a short break here for that.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right. What other matters do counsel wish to discuss here before we proceed? I'm not sure if we have all of our jurors present. We had a large group from the Eric Menendez jury go into the jury room. I don't know if the other jurors are all here yet or not, but assuming they are, and that we want to proceed fairly soon, what else do you want to discuss?
I wanted to discuss Friday's witness. I think we don't have any discovery on this witness, but I believe it's another teacher from Princeton Day School. Okay.
All right. Well, what I would suggest is that you discuss the matter, and if there is any reason for the people to want to conduct a hearing or discuss it further, we can do that. But at this point, without the prosecution knowing more about it, it's kind of difficult to discuss it. So I'd ask that. All right. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. I had mentioned, I guess you did before we were here,
Right.
that we were going to try to put Terry Baralt on today rather than tomorrow. She flew in last night and we meet with her in the restaurant and she'll be testifying this afternoon.
Okay. Are there any matters that relate to her testimony prior to,
Well, I'd like a chance to speak with Ms. Lansing about that,
All
to see
right.
what the scope is going to be.
okay.
Your Honor, with respect to the neighbors issue, have indicated that I plan to call 2 additional neighbors. And I've informed the prosecution which neighbors, and they've indicated that they don't have any objection. One should be here now, the other one will be here at 1:30.
All right.
But additional, I mean, just 2.
Two.
In addition to the ones that you call.
In addition to the ones that you call.
Okay.
All right. So prosecution called 1 and you're calling 2.
Yes.
Okay. So you have Ms. LiCausi for brief testimony, potentially brief testimony, and then one neighbor, and who else this morning?
One neighbor, Your Honor, if the court would let me go out and see if the second neighbor arrived. I tried
Okay.
to ask her to come at 10, but she was out of town,
Yeah.
so I'm.
What is the time estimate for Ms. Baralt, Mrs. Baralt?
I would say about an hour of direct.
And the defense also indicated that you would be prepared to present to the court a list of your witnesses for the balance of the trial.
Yes, we can do that this afternoon. We haven't been able to talk.
Okay.
Because of
Sure.
Davidson being out of town, so we need to find myself.
What's going on?
Your Honor, I just have one neighbor out there now. I think the other one, Mrs. Lloyd, will be here at 1:30.
So potentially we have perhaps 20 minutes worth of testimony this morning. Is that about it?
If the court would want to do this, I believe Mrs. Baralt was supposed to be here at 9 o'clock this morning. If we finish with those 2 witnesses and break, then there'd be no reason we couldn't resume earlier than 1:30. I need about an hour. So if the court wanted to make it kind of an alteration in the schedule, we'd be prepared to go forward.
All right. Well, let's see how we're doing here as far as when we get started and how long this other testimony takes. Sometimes the jurors have made other arrangements too for the normal time during lunch hour, but that's certainly a possibility. Can we find out if our jurors are all here?
Gold is present.
Okay. And
I believe blue is present, but one is outside.
okay. All right, then. Are we ready to proceed then with the testimony of the next witnesses?
Yes.
All right, then let's get both juries in and we'll proceed. In the trial, we have now both juries present as well as all the other participants in the trial. Good morning to you all. And we're ready to resume with the trial. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you. We got Lisa LiCausi, Your Honor.
My name is Pamela LiCausi. My last name is spelt L-I, capital C-A-U-S-I.
Good morning. Can you tell the juries where you reside?
I live on 1000.
And were you living in Los Angeles back in 1987 and 1988?
Yes, I was.
Where were you working at that time?
A place called Intercontinental Group.
And what is Intercontinental Group?
It's an equipment leasing firm.
And what did you do in the company?
I was the executive assistant secretarial.
And who was your boss?
Richard Klein.
And could you tell the juries what you did for Mr. Klein?
Basically, I interacted with all of the investors. I did secretarial work, computers, among other things. I took care of making plans, meetings, attended meetings.
And you would actually physically be present at his meetings?
Yes, I would.
How many people were employed by Intercontinental Group?
Approximately 9.
And did you have contact with those 9 people as well as Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Did you have occasion in approximately early 1987 to meet a person named L. Jerome Oziel?
Yes.
And do you know if Mr. Oziel knew Richard Klein?
Yes.
Do you know how they knew each other?
Yes.
How did they know each other?
They knew each other. Jerry Oziel used to be or was his psychiatrist then became his friend, then became his best friend, then became a business partner.
Your Honor, I would just like to, being here, sir.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Well, do you know, without telling you what someone else told you, based on your own personal observation of seeing Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel interact, what their relationship was?
Yes.
What was it?
Before, at one time, he was strictly his psychiatrist and friend, and then all of a sudden he became a business partner too.
And you know that because you were conducting Mr. Klein's business?
Exactly.
And were you also arranging through telephone or otherwise meetings between Mr. Oziel
Yes.
and Richard Klein?
Yes.
And can you give us your best estimation of when it was that you first came into contact with Mr. Oziel?
First day I ever worked there.
Which was when?
It was April 3rd, 1987, or April 4th, 1987.
And what was the business, if there was one, that Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel were involved in?
They wanted to start a sort of credit card business called Automax.
A credit card business? Just very briefly, do you know the nature of the business without getting into details?
They would make a credit card that you could use to purchase vehicles, to rent vehicles, parts for vehicles, and then they wanted to expand even greater where you could almost like get your hair done or something with your credit card. They wanted to conquer the world with this particular credit card.
And if you know, whose business idea was that?
Richard Klein's.
And did Mr. Oziel come into the picture after Mr. Klein conceived of that business idea?
Yes, he did.
And did Mr. Oziel, in fact, move into the office that Richard Klein had at that time?
Yes, but he continued to still have his other office in Beverly Hills.
But he had a space in your office as well?
Yes.
And how frequently would you interact with Mr. Oziel during the period of time that you were working there?
I would talk to him every day almost on the telephone, and at first, and he would come in like once a week. Then when the Automax business got started, every single day.
And would that interaction include phone contact as well as seeing him in person?
Yes.
And when you saw him in person, could you describe for the jury the situations just in general where you would interact with him in person?
Basically, he'd be in the office and we'd be having meetings and stuff. Sometimes all of us were not there. There'd be times when Richard would be handling a phone call in his office and Jerry would start saying bad things about Richard. And I would just say, wait a minute.
You
Well, wait a minute.
answer the question.
Okay.
You've gone actually beyond the question. So the last part of the answer about what was said by Mr. Oziel is stricken.
My question was, what kinds of situations would you see them interacting? You mentioned business meetings.
Business meetings,
And-
lunches.
And you would be personally present at these business meetings and luncheons?
Yes.
Were there situations where you would be with Mr. Oziel and Mr. Klein and other people, and you would hear Mr. Oziel make certain statements without getting into what the statements were?
Yes.
And then did you, outside the presence of Mr. Klein, hear him make directly contrary statements?
Yes.
And did you also hear him make similar contradictory statements about other employees that you were working with and Mr. Oziel was interacting with?
Okay, counsel, we're going beyond the offer here.
Over what period of time did you interact with Mr. Oziel where you were seeing him make statements both in and outside the presence of your boss, Mr. Klein?
10 to 11 months, constantly.
And did you also have occasion to see Mr. Oziel interact with other office staff besides Mr. Klein?
Yes.
And did there come a time when your boss was hospitalized?
Yes.
And do you know just roughly the time period when that happened?
I have it in my notes. I write everything on my calendar. Basically, it was probably 8 months into when I was working there.
And while your boss was hospitalized, did you have occasion to see Jerry Oziel operate in the business that you were involved in?
Yes.
And did you see him operate with other employees in the absence of your boss?
Yes.
And after your boss got out of the hospital, did Mr. Klein and Mr. Oziel separate business-wise?
They started separation.
And did Mr. Oziel take a certain number of employees who formerly worked for Mr. Klein and go somewhere else?
Yes.
And did you continue to interact with those former employees that Mr. Oziel took with him?
Yes.
Overall, the answer will stand.
And did you continue to interact with Mr. Klein specifically about Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And did you continue to interact with Mr. Klein right up to his death in 1992 concerning Mr. Oziel?
Not exactly up until his death. About
All right,
a year
you've
before.
answered the question.
Shortly before his death?
Yes.
All right. And based on your contact with Mr. Oziel during the period of time that you were involved with him and your observation of him in various situations, do you have an opinion as to his honesty or the lack thereof?
Yes.
Could you tell the juries what your opinion is about his honesty or his lack of honesty?
He is extremely dishonest.
Thank you very much.
All right, cross-examination.
Ms. LiCausi, you were very loyal to Mr. Klein, is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Klein and Dr. Oziel had a business falling out, wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yes.
And did Mr. Klein have a drinking problem?
Yes.
And was he almost always inebriated during the time that you worked for him?
Frequently.
Did you give an interview to the defense investigator in this case?
Yes.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at that to see the frequency with which Mr. Klein was inebriated?
Overruled.
May I approach,
Well,
please?
first of all, the question was, would it refresh your memory?
Okay.
Yes.
Now, did you tell the defense investigators that Richard Klein was almost always inebriated?
I meant frequently.
Okay, not almost always.
Yes.
Were you present in Dr. Oziel's office on the night of October the 31st of 1989?
And the basis of the objection, beyond the scope of direct examination. Sustained.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
Yes. Said you had a certain amount of loyalty to Mr. Klein,
Yes.
and you said he was inebriated. Was he a good businessman?
Yes, he was.
And did you think he was vulnerable?
Absolutely.
Did you think Dr. Oziel took advantage of him?
Without a doubt.
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
Did you, in addition to seeing Dr. Oziel interact with your boss who was inebriated, also see him interact with several other people within your business?
Yes.
Is your opinion about his extreme dishonesty based solely on what you saw between Dr. Oziel and your boss?
No.
Objection beyond the scope of discretion.
Overruled, that answer will stand.
And could you explain why it's not based just on that opinion,
Objection irrelevant.
just on that
Objection sustained.
interaction?
Objection sustained. Under section 352 of the evidence code as well.
Could you explain to the jury why you had a certain loyalty to Mr. Klein?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, anything else?
No.
All right, you may sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you have your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. May I just go out in the hall?
Yes.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Emmanuel David Zlotolow, EMANUEL DAVID, Z like a zebra, LOTOLOW.
Mr. Zlotolow, in August of 1989, where were you living?
Yes.
Mr. Burke is putting up a chart, which I would like marked Exhibit 200 for identification. It's
All right.
been shown to the district attorney.
That's a chart or a map of streets.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Zlotolow, would you take a look at the chart that's been marked Exhibit 200 and see if you recognize
Yeah, I'm
what's
on.
on there?
Twist a little. I can't see.
Okay, you can. Here.
All right, I got it.
Right, there's a pointer over there if you're going to need him to point to anything.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you see it all right from where you are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, here's the pointer. Can you?
All right.
Right. Does this appear to be a map of the area in which you live in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
Okay. And does it show your house at 713 North Maple Drive?
Yes.
Okay. Could you point to your house? And is Zlotolow written in green where your house is?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with Elm Drive in Beverly Hills?
Yes.
And where is Elm Drive in relation to Maple Drive?
1 block west. It's right there.
And between Elm Drive, the houses on Elm Drive and Maple Drive, is there an alley?
Yes.
Okay, and is that an alley that is shared by the houses?
Yes.
Could you point to the area where the alley is on the map?
Right through here.
Okay. Are you familiar with 722 North Elm Drive?
Yes, vaguely.
Okay. And can you see if you can find 722 North Elm Drive on that map and point to it for us? Right, and that's a place that has Menendez written on it, correct?
Correct.
Right, now, getting back to August 20th, 1989, were you at home in the evening?
Yes.
And where, say between 9 and 11 that evening, where in your home were you?
In my bedroom.
Okay, and where is your bedroom?
Located at the rear of the house.
Okay. Now, when you say located at the rear of the house, is that, could you point on the map as to where in your lot your bedroom would be located?
Right about there.
Okay, about midpoint in the area?
Yeah.
And were you alone or were you with anyone else?
I was with some friends.
Who were you with? What are your friends' names?
It was my girlfriend and 2 friends from Las Vegas.
Okay. Now, your bedroom faces in what direction?
West towards the alley.
All right. So it faces actually towards the back of Elm Drive, correct?
Yes.
What were you doing? You said you were watching TV. Do you remember what you were watching?
Yeah, James Bond film.
What was the weather that night, if you remember?
I recall that it was warm.
Okay. And do you recall whether or not the windows in your bedroom were open?
Definitely they were open, all of them, because it was really hot that day earlier.
Okay. During the time that you were watching the James Bond movie, did you hear anything unusual?
Yes.
And what did you hear?
Series of popping sounds.
Were these sounds that were quick one after another?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you heard the popping sounds, were you able to tell what direction they were coming from?
Yeah, from up the block.
When you say from up the block, what do you mean?
This direction.
Okay, so they were
I guess to the northwest.
to the northwest of you. That would be in the direction of Elm Drive.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you do anything as a result of hearing these sounds?
Not immediately, no.
Okay. Did you think that?
Well, we haven't heard the question yet.
Thank you. What did you think the sounds were when you heard them that evening?
I didn't really think about it, but it could have been firecrackers. Could have been really anything.
All right. The next morning, come to find out about some unusual activity in the neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that?
I heard on the TV that there was a mafia hit on Elm Drive, something like this.
Did you see anything in your neighborhood that was unusual? Did you see police?
Yes, I saw police.
Okay. And that was in the area of 722 North Elm Drive?
Yeah, and in the alley. They were all over the place.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Mr. Zlotolow, is that
Yes.
close in pronunciation? Close?
Good enough.
Okay. Were you in your bedroom or were you in the guest house, or are those one and the same?
I was in my bedroom.
Is there also a guest house on the property?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone that you had been in the guest house at the time that you heard these noises?
Well, at the time, I was living in the bedroom, but now I live in the guest house. I moved. It's at the back of the property.
Okay, so the guest house is closer to the alley than your bedroom, is that correct?
It's right on the alley, yeah.
And so that would have been at the back of the property versus the middle of the property.
Correct.
And so it's your present recollection then that on the night that you heard these noises, you weren't in the guest house, but you were in your bedroom inside of the main house?
Yes.
And you had a television inside your bedroom?
Yes.
And I believe it's your testimony that you and your girlfriend and two friends of yours from Las Vegas were watching a James Bond movie.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Do you remember which James Bond movie it was?
They said it was The Spy Who Loved Me. They should have it in the TV guide.
Okay. Do you have a specific memory of watching it, or are you just repeating something that you may have learned recently?
No, I was watching the film.
All right. And do you remember at what point during the film it was that you heard these noises? In other words, had the movie started? Was it finished? Where was it?
Somewhere in the middle of the film.
Did you make any attempt at the time that you heard the noises to try to see what time it was?
No.
Okay. How long had you lived in that neighborhood as of August the 20th of 89?
I think that'd be 13 years.
During the summer, and especially around the 4th of July, had you ever heard firecrackers in your neighborhood?
Yes.
And do you have any memory of whether that summer you had heard firecrackers around the 4th of July?
Not specifically.
Now, when you said you heard popping noises, could you tell us about how many noises you heard?
I've gone over it in my head many times, and I'm going to say it's like 7 or 8. There was a couple, and then a short gap, and then a couple more.
All right. So when you're saying a couple, you mean more than 2 then?
Yes.
And so you heard some noises, and then you heard a break in the noises. Is that correct?
Yeah, like a pause.
All right. And then you heard some more noises. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And I take it that at the time you had an opinion about what those noises were.
Yeah, I guess. At the time I heard them, I thought probably it was firecrackers. It sounded like it could have been a string of firecrackers going off.
And so what did you do in regards to hearing those noises? Did you call the police?
No.
Did any of the people that you were watching the movie with call the police?
No, but we all heard it.
All
and we
right.
discussed it. It was after we went to the beach that day and everybody was tired.
Okay, wait.
Sorry.
You really can't testify to what other people say.
All right.
What I asked you is whether or not you called the police.
No.
All right. And so, but you did note with the other people in the room with you watching the movie appeared to perk up and listen. Would that be correct to say?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I believe you indicated that it was a very hot day that day, and therefore all the windows in your bedroom were open.
Yes.
How many windows did you have in your bedroom?
Well, this is my bedroom, and then there was like an adjoining room, and the adjoining room was like all windows. We've since remodeled the house. It's no longer like that, but I'd say 5 or 6 windows.
And so all of the available windows in those 2 areas were open?
Yes.
Did you hear any other noises, loud noises that night prior to hearing the popping noises? You have to say out loud.
Oh, no.
All right, court reporter can't take it down when you
Oh,
raise your
sorry.
head. Now, the 2 defendants who are here in court, Lyle and Eric Menendez, did you know them personally as of the 20th of August of 1989?
No.
And you'd never seen them before?
No.
Had you ever heard any other noises coming from the direction that were distinctive, the same direction that you've told us about? Within the month prior to the popping noise?
I'd say no.
we have a moment, please? Oh, I have, yes, I have a couple more questions. Have you at one time described these noises as being somewhat muffled?
Yeah. It could
Is
be.
that correct, that they were muffled?
Yeah.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Redirect.
Just very briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Zlotolow, you live in this house with your parents, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Or you lived there with your parents back in 1989?
Yes.
And when you describe, you say the word muffled, what do you mean?
She used the word.
Okay. But you said that they were muffled sounds. Were they?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Well, I guess you'd really have to play a bunch of sounds and compare them. It's kind of complicated to explain, but there's clear, sharp sounds, and then there are other sounds that aren't so clear. And muffled can mean anything in between those 2 points.
Okay. So they were sounds that you heard at some distance.
Yes.
Okay. And you said that there were about 7 or 8 pops that you remember hearing?
Yes.
And that's obviously your best guess at this point, right?
Yes.
And you said that you heard 2 and there was a short gap?
I heard
Pause.
a few. It could have been 3, could have been 4.
Okay. Was that a gap of like seconds?
Maybe a second and a half.
So it was very short.
Yeah, short gap.
All right, thank you. I have nothing further.
Any recross? All right, thank you. May step down. You're excused.
Thank you.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Qunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Qunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Qunol, the brand I trust.
In regards to the next witness, the attorneys have had to do a little juggling of their witnesses, rescheduling of witnesses to have witnesses available because of the change in our schedule here, because of the days off and uncertainty as to when we would be able to start again. So their next witness has arrived, but they need some time to speak with that witness. And there might be some matters that have to be discussed by the lawyers in the court in relationship to that witness's testimony. So first of all, to give the lawyers a chance to speak with the witness, and then give them a chance to speak with me if they want to. I don't know if they will. We'll take a break at this point and resume at 1:30 as far as the juries are concerned. We'll have the lawyers stay here for a few minutes to discuss matters. And also the lawyers will be back at 1 o'clock so that we can resume with any matters that have to be resolved before the witness testifies this afternoon. So I'll excuse both jury panels with the instructions not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:30 as to each jury. All right, the bailiff has indicated that all the jurors have left, so we can now briefly discuss some matters that were brought up at the sidebar here. There was reference to a tape recording and certain assertions of privilege in relationship to that. Did the parties want to expand on that? Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, the people indicated that they wanted to submit some additional points and authorities on the issue, but I don't believe they have.
Okay, let's just go back. This was a matter that was litigated in this court. My recollection is the latter part of July and the 1st of August, we had 2 separate days of hearings or portions of days of hearings. And the matter relates to the session that occurred on December the 11th, 1989 with Dr. Oziel and the 2 defendants. And that was the only session between the three individuals that was actually tape recorded, where the voices of the defendants and the voice of Dr. Oziel were tape recorded.
No, I really think now that I think about it, we should be doing this in camera. That's a tape that the Supreme Court has ruled was privileged. And even the nature of that tape, this hearing's in camera.
Well, this is all, as far as what I'm saying, this is all recited in the Supreme Court opinion, so it's not anything confidential. It's referred to as a matter that is a public record. You can't seal the Supreme Court reports. So, yeah, I'm just going through what is a matter of public record here, that this was a tape recorded session between the defendants and Dr. Oziel on December the 11th. And there has been a determination by the California Supreme Court that that session was ruled privileged under the patient psychotherapist privilege. And the prosecution has given notice that it intends to seek access to that tape recording based on a theory that the defendants either now or in the future will tender or will have tendered their mental state as an issue in the case, thereby making the patient psychotherapist privilege no longer applicable. And the defense has asserted another privilege, the attorney-client privilege, in relationship to the December 11th session. And the issue is based upon the evidence offered by the defense. The issue is before the court as to whether or not the attorney-client privilege applies to that session. The prosecution was not present for the hearings that took place. They were excluded from the courtroom at the request of the defense. So they are not aware of the specifics of what was offered by way of evidence during that hearing. Which obviously puts the prosecution at a disadvantage in reference to citing to the court any legal authorities they wish the court to consider in regards to whether the patient-therapist privilege does or does not apply. What is the position of the parties as to, number one, whether the prosecution is going to submit anything, or when it would be submitted, and respond to my remarks?
Your Honor, it appears that People versus Lines and People versus Arcega, which are two cases cited in the defense response, are correct statements of the relationship between the attorney-client and the psychotherapist patient privilege as it relates to the 1016 issue. And so we have no dispute with the state of the law. As the court has just noted, we are at a disadvantage because it's now a factual issue. And there is not extensive case law on the relationship of how the attorney-client and this, which I guess it then boils down to a work product type of thing, that the Dr. Oziel would be, his work would be work product of the attorney because he'd be working for him or at his request. And so it seems to me that this is a factual issue, and I don't have any legal authority that disputes either Lines or Arcega because there isn't any. But we don't know precisely what the factual underpinnings are. We just know some of the surrounding underpinnings, which I could point out at this time. It appears that this is a 1016 issue. But I'd also like to point out that in addition to this particular tape of the December the 11th, we are also seeking any other records, and I think that would include a session from November the 28th, as well as what it now is apparent that there was a tape recording made by Dr. Oziel of all of his sessions with the defendants up to a certain point.
You mean the tape recording of his notes?
Yes, his notes.
All right, the only tape recording that has been made known to the court of the actual
session itself was the tape recording of the session of December the 11th.
Your Honor, I believe that's the only session that they're claiming the attorney-client privilege, and that the other sessions are not, they're not claiming the attorney-client privilege for the other ones. I don't know, but that's my supposition. So it seems to me that we have two issues. One is whether or not the attorney-client privilege attaches to the December 11th tape, and whether the raising of the mental state vitiates the psychotherapeutic privilege as to other sessions with Dr. Oziel, which did not occur on December the 11th. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Well, obviously, we would never get to any issue of attorney-client privilege if the patient-therapist privilege still prevails. So that's the starting point. And that has not been presented to the court for decision yet as to whether the mental state of the defendants has been tendered to the point of causing the patient-therapist privilege to be waived as to all sessions or as to any sessions. There was certainly quite a bit of discussion during the testimony of Dr. Oziel relating to primarily cross-examination and as to whether or not certain questions asked of Dr. Oziel during the cross-examination caused the witness to be put in a situation where he couldn't answer truthfully or fully, rather, as to the entirety of a response to a question because he was foreclosed by the assertion by the defendants of privilege as to certain sessions. That was an issue that we discussed at length, primarily at the sidebar various times during his testimony when objections were raised that the privilege issue was being brought into play. And as of now, the court's ruling has been that none of the cross-examination got to the point of waiving those, the privilege as to those sessions. But there's obviously more to come. I don't know precisely what the defense evidence will be. And in regards to the patient-therapist privilege, my view now is as it was when the people first filed their motion and the defense first filed its response, that until I hear the evidence, I'm not in a position to make a decision as to whether there is or is not a waiver under Section 1016. And I certainly don't intend to do that before the issue is ripe for decision. And as far as the attorney-client privilege is concerned, it relates only to the let me back up and have the defense respond to the prosecution's contention. Does it only apply to the December 11th tape recorded session where the defendants and Dr. Oziel are actually heard on that tape, or does it relate to other sessions as well?
I can respond to that. Could I also make some additional comments based on
Yes.
what the court has indicated? The attorney-client privilege argument does relate only to the December 11th tape.
I would agree with you.
And
Michael, let me just footnote that there may be an attorney-client issue that the court has not heard evidence on that may relate to the original therapy sessions because of what we have heard about how my client in particular came to be with Dr. Oziel to begin with.
Well, I've heard evidence regarding that as part of the defense evidence that was offered in relationship to the December 11th session. So
No, also Dr. Oziel testified in front of Eric Menendez's jury that Eric came to him because of the Calabasas problems.
Yeah, that's true.
He had a court case.
If the defense is expanding its position that attorney-client privilege applied to all of those sessions that took place from the time Dr. Oziel was hired until December the 11th, is that your position?
No. I think, though, that there were two specific points at which the information may be attorney-client privilege, and that would be I mean, I don't want to argue it by carving it out, but I think the earlier sessions that had, prior to the resolution of the juvenile court matter may be covered by attorney-client privilege. After that, when, well, I can't say more than that, but after that, up until the time of the homicides, I would not be asserting attorney-client privilege, only psychotherapist-patient privilege for those sessions. And we have not asserted attorney-client privilege for November 28th.
All right, anything else at this point?
The other thing I wanted to bring to the court's attention, that people indicated they're in the dark as to the nature of the claim on the attorney-client argument with respect to the December 11th tape. That's not entirely true, because the prosecution has in its possession a police report which memorializes an interview between Detective Zoller and Mr. Oziel at the time of the service of the search warrant, in which Dr. Oziel, in our view, wrongfully, but in any event, laid out for Detective Zoller the circumstances surrounding the making of the December 11th tape. And so they are in a position, I think, to argue from a factual standpoint whether the attorney-client privilege applies or not. And in focusing the court's attention on the December 11th issue and the attorney-client privilege, that issue does not depend on what testimony is forthcoming in the future. It seems to me that that issue is joined. And my feeling is if the court resolved that issue, it may make unnecessary some of the litigation about the 1016 issue, because if we were assured that December 11th was protected by the attorney-client privilege, there may be a situation where that may resolve some issues with respect to the other tapes. So that was our purpose in bringing that issue up with the court at an early stage, so the court could rule on that. And I think that there's really nothing preventing the court from doing so from a legal and factual standpoint.
Well, I don't see that there really would be that great amount of litigation in relationship to the 1016 issue. It's been briefed, and I don't see that really there's going to take much more other than a very brief oral argument and ruling by the court on that issue. So I don't think it will play any role as far as the timing of this matter, whether I rule on the attorney-client issue now or later.
There was one final point I wanted to make to the court, which is what we would seek to prevent, because the December 11th tape, I think the court realizes, because it does contain the voices of the brothers, is of the most importance to us of all the tapes. And if the court did not sustain our claim of privilege, we probably would seek some appellate review of that ruling. We would be prevented from doing so if the court waited until a point in time when we were in the middle of presenting psychiatric testimony to make a ruling on the attorney-client privilege. And I think in the interest, because of the nature of the claim, it is a privilege claim. If the court overrules the claim of privilege, I think we would be bound to try and preserve the privilege by seeking appellate review. And I think we'd be prevented from doing that if the court holds off on that until when we're in the middle of presenting psychiatric testimony.
Right, and just to follow that through one step further, I take it from your position that the defense does not intend under any circumstances to offer that tape of December 11th in evidence itself.
That's true.
Okay. All right. Do the people wish to respond to any of these remarks?
Well, just briefly, it's unclear to me exactly which portions of the sessions with defendant Eric Menendez, his attorneys are claiming are subject to the attorney-client privilege, but I would note that Exhibit 127, which has been marked but not offered by the defense, is a confidentiality release by Eric Menendez to others, including Mr. Chaliff, which would, it seemed to me, would indicate that Mr. Chaliff was not employing Dr. Oziel at that time, or was not in any kind of relationship with him, which would indicate that the attorney-client privilege attached, because there would be no necessity for a waiver if in fact there was that pre-existing relationship. And I would also ask that if the court is inclined to rule on the attorney-client privilege in the near future, that we be given the opportunity, perhaps the court could frame the issues that the court is concerned about factually or hypothetically, so that we would have an understanding or an ability to perhaps do a little further research about the attachment of the attorney-client privilege to the psychotherapeutic relationship.
Well, the only problem in doing that, and this is a ticklish issue and one that makes the court uncomfortable in that it's a matter that is presented solely by the defense in camera to the court. The prosecution is not present. The prosecution doesn't know the specifics of the evidence. And the reasons for that is that it's an assertion of a privilege and the evidence code and specific sections of the evidence code provide for in-camera hearings where the matter is presented outside the hearing of the opposition. And the court is uncomfortable in not having input from both sides on an issue that is of great significance to both sides. And if either side has some suggestions as to how the court can provide sufficient information to the prosecution to permit the prosecution to make an intelligent presentation to the court, I would be grateful to hear your suggestions without disclosing those matters that were regarded as privileged themselves. Mr. Burt?
Well, my only suggestion to the court is knowing what was elicited in camera and knowing what is in that report that I referred to earlier. I think that people can look at that report and construct their argument as to why the privilege does not apply, because I think the facts set out in that report raise the issue that I think the court would be concerned with.
Well, why don't you show me that report then, since I've never seen it. And
Right. I don't have it with me because I didn't anticipate we were going to discuss this issue.
Yeah, we're not,
Certainly can provide that to the
okay,
court.
this is not something that's going to be resolved today, but certainly it's worth discussing so that as much input can be made prior to its resolution. Yeah, I would like to see that report to see if it does contain within it those matters that were presented to the court. I certainly would be prepared to make findings of fact that relate to what occurred during the hearings we had. But as I said, those findings of fact could, by the nature of the findings, disclose the confidences that were presented to the court in confidence with the understanding they would not be subject to disclosure.
I think it'd be helpful to the court if I could provide that so the court can see exactly what information the people have.
Okay. All right. We'll take a recess until 1 o'clock. And if council have any matters you want to discuss at that point, we'll do that at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
The defendants are in court with their lawyers. The people are represented. Do counsel have any matters to resolve before the witness testifies?
Your Honor, I was under the impression that Mrs. Baralt would be testifying because she is the executor of the estate, but it appears that's going to be Mr. Baralt's role. So I think that we're back to more specific instances of the same thing that we've already had lots of testimony about. And I'm wondering if it might be time for us to interpose an objection. I'm not wondering, I am interposing an objection to 352. I just don't know how many more of these specific instances that jury can endure. I think it's getting very cumulative.
And what is the specific offer of proof in regards to this witness?
Your Honor, Mrs. Baralt is the sister of Jose Menendez and the sister-in-law of Kitty Menendez. She knew them for 29 years. For 14 and a half of those years, they lived within 15 minutes, saw them on a regular basis. They were in each other's homes regularly. She is Lila's godmother, knew him from birth, knew Eric from birth. And I expect that her testimony would take probably an hour. She has specific observations which both predate and postdate the homicide. I do not expect to go into some of the broader themes that we've covered with other witnesses, but go into particular events that she personally observed that no one else did, and that illustrate particular qualities about either Mr. or Mrs. Menendez or either of the boys. I don't think it's, I've gone through it at lunchtime with her and eliminated some more in the area. I don't think it's going to be particularly lengthy, but she does have access to information which no one else did.
Specifically, what is it that she is going to say?
You want me to go through all of them?
Well, things that you say that are unique to her that no one else has covered.
She has a variety of situations that she observed, such as Eric being left home alone at 8 years of age. There's a huge storm. He calls her house. She sends her older daughter over. And Mrs. Menendez responds in a rage that this is inappropriate. This child has to be taught to be fearless. Children can take care of themselves, and he is no longer allowed to call. Another incident at the theme park where there's some ride that's frightening, and one of the boys doesn't want to go on it. It's the response to that. Her observations of Lila's spending habits before the homicide and after the homicide, her awareness of the contact between the parents and Lyle in particular after they moved to California, to Calabasas. She indicates that Kitty would call every day at 4 o'clock, asking detailed questions of Lyle, her about Lyle. Would be on the phone for about an hour, then would contact Lyle and talk about what was going on. Oziel would call every day about 2 in the afternoon, asking similar questions. They came to visit 1 to 2 times per month, at least during the time they were in California. She was living in New Jersey, and Lyle was back there, so I think it indicates the amount of contact and control the families had. She has early childhood information, such as the fact that it was a very big issue was made out of the fact that Lyle could stand at 5 months and he could walk at 7 months, and he had his IQ tested at 3 years and had this superior IQ, and what the plans were and the grooming of this child from the very early days. She can testify to Eric's sleep disorder and being distraught after the homicide, how he was behaving, how Lyle was behaving. It is her home to which Eric crosses the street on a daily basis at 1.5 years and gains admittance to her house, and her repeatedly talking to Kitty about the fact that it's dangerous for a child to cross the street, to cross this yard, and the fact that Kitty, all that Kitty ever does is get angry at Eric for going over there, does nothing to prevent that. She is a witness to 2 of the prolonged basement conversations while Lyle is in college. She's the only witness who can indicate that the talks, which began when he was 6, were still going on at that point in time. He was making decisions. Both Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were making decisions for Lyle with regard to schools, girlfriends, careers, etc. She can talk about the value system that was taught. She is a witness to the early marriage years between Kitty and Jose, in which she witnesses physical fights between the two. She witnessed Kitty's rage, her hitting Jose, him restraining her. She's obviously in the house. She knows about how the house is maintained, how the kids are maintained. She can describe the children when they're very young in terms of their personalities, which will be very brief. And she also can talk about the fact that after the move to California, she spoke to Kitty on this regular basis, which I've already referred to, that she sounded happy and successful and never revealed anything about what was actually going on in her life, and was able to maintain this facade quite successfully in spite of the fact that their contact was quite close. She can address the issue of the travel plans for that summer with regard to Kitty's claim that she was going to Quito, Peru. She can start out by pointing out that something a lot of other people could, but that Quito is in Ecuador and that there were no plans to go to South America, and they had family plans she was aware of, which made such a plan a total fabrication on Mrs. Menendez's part. She's aware of the fact that the family was buying a condominium for Lyle and was excited about it and planning to help move him in there on September the 9th. that certain rules have been created with regard to what she needs to do if Lyle's then girlfriend, Jamie, were to show up, and some spying that Kitty wanted her to do in that regard. I think all of these are incidents that are not testified to by anybody else. And as I've indicated, I don't think the direct would be over an hour.
And the co-defendant intends to elicit any information from this witness?
No, Your Honor, we agreed that Ms. Lansing would elicit the incidents that we were interested in, and we agree, and she's just recounted them to the court.
I would just say that it sounds like that testimony would take more than an hour based upon what has been produced with other witnesses, quite frankly. What is the people's response?
Well, the incident about Eric being home alone at age 8, we already had Mark Takano testified about him being home alone at age 9 with fever. She, in fact, she testified to 2 separate instances where he was home alone, one of which she went to drop off her child, as the court will recall. The theme park where Eric was supposed to go on a scary ride is very similar to the cemetery episode that we've already had recounted to the jury. The fact that Mrs. Menendez would call every day at 4 p.m. when the family had moved out here and Lyle Menendez was still in Princeton is not relevant to any issue in dispute in this case. And I can't see how the fact that she called has anything to do with any issues that are going to be raised by the defense. The fact that the parents boasted about their child, Lyle, standing at age 5 months and being above average, it doesn't appear to be relevant to any issues in this case. The fact that Eric Menendez was distraught after the homicides has been clearly demonstrated by the fact that Dr. Oziel testified that he received a call from a relative of Eric's that Eric needed counseling as of October, the end of October of 1989. There's already been testimony that as a child, Eric Menendez used to cross the street and go to Mrs. Baralt's home. I think that was the testimony of Alan Anderson. The prolonged basement conversations have already been testified to by other relatives. The early marriage, I believe that Mrs. Goldsmith testified to some of the issues regarding the early marriage, but more importantly, Mr. Alan Anderson testified to fights between Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, which were made at a time when the defendants would have been more aware of those fights and at a time closer to the homicides. The early personalities of the early childhood personalities of the defendants has already been testified to, and Mrs. Menendez's housekeeping is something that I think everyone who's watched this trial is well familiar with. I think we've had enough testimony about the ferret to last a lifetime.
Both direct and cross-examination, by the way.
Yes, yes, Your Honor. The travel plans, I don't understand what the defense point is about that. We found in the discovery that Eric Menendez had reservations to go to Argentina on the 26th of August of 1989. There's also, I think, a reservation for Chile. There's no Quito, Peru, but there is South America on the ticket reservations. The condominium in Princeton purchased by the parents was testified to on Monday by Alicia Hertz, and Mrs. Menendez's dislike of Jamie, I think, was testified to by Mark Takano or some other witness. So it appears that there's very little about the testimony that's unique.
Let me ask the defense, how many more, if any, witnesses are you calling on any of these subjects relating to this witness's testimony or those of other family members that we've heard so far?
Your Honor, this would be the last witness who would testify in this area. We are going to call Carlos Baralt, her husband, but that is more related to he is operating as the executive of the estate and will be more related to business information in terms of buying a restaurant, etc., and also some information he has about the college, the selection of the college, which Mrs. Baralt is not going to go into, discussions that he had with Mr. Menendez. They're in a unique position in that Terry Baralt is Carlos Menendez's older sister. Jose Menendez's older sister. They came from Cuba together. They were together all through his college years, all through the early marriage and all the childhood years. They were the closest people to him in terms of the frequency with which they saw them.
They lived across the street from him in Illinois. They lived very close to him in Princeton for a number of years. Carlos Baralt was employed by and taken to Chicago with Jose Menendez when he went there to work. So no one else has the kind of access to the family on a regular basis that they did. And one of the things that Mrs. Baralt will be able to talk about is the fact that behavior that she would see exhibited if it was a social gathering and there were a number of people around was different from the behavior that she would observe when it was just them, because they were so close.
I think to answer the court's question more directly, however, this is basically the last witness who's going to testify to these kinds of issues. And from our perspective, what's important about, in response to what Mrs. Kucinich was saying, well, we heard a different incident in which Eric was terrorized, this time in the cemetery. The point for our experts is it isn't just the fact of isolated episodes of abuse that shapes the personality or the emotionality of an individual. It's what they call chronicity, the fact that it is chronic and constant and multidimensional. And although we are certainly not going to prove either through other witnesses nor to our clients every single abusive thing that happened, the fact that more than one person at more than one time saw these kinds of behaviors is relevant.
What is the schedule for the rest of the trial? What is it that you have discussed in that regard? When is, who are your next witnesses after this week?
We didn't have the meeting that we were hoping to have because Mrs. Lansing was doing a witness at lunch.
What is the general idea, consensus as to what you're doing next?
Of how many witnesses?
Who's coming in next? What phase of the case are we going to be in after this?
I can indicate that from our standpoint, that the next witnesses we would be putting on would be the mental health witnesses with regard to Mrs. Menendez, and then our client will testify. We have, for us, the rest of this week, we have Peter Connell will testify in front of our jury, and I think Skip Lowe will testify in front of our jury. I think they'll be all for our jury, and then next week we have 3 witnesses we anticipate calling, and then
Who are they?
Dr. Emery, who's the doctor who's prescribed the medication for her, Dr. Cox, who was her first therapist in California, and Dr. Summerfield, who was a therapist for the prolonged period of time.
I can't hear you. The last.
Dr. Summerfield, who was the therapist she was seeing up until just briefly.
And how long do you expect that testimony to take?
For the 3 of those?
Yes.
Probably a day total.
And are there any objections to their testimony?
Pardon, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I was just handed discovery, Skip Lowe, who the defense just indicated who that is. Okay, yes, there's gonna be objections to having the psychotherapist from the mother's testified. I think that's been our position all along.
All right, do you have any thing that you're going to file in that regard, or just?
Well, I did file it in the motion in limine.
And that is what you will rely on in your argument?
Well, when are they supposed to be called? Next week?
Next week.
Yeah. Yes, Your Honor, I'm in the process of doing further research on the issue of this kind of testimony, but we are still of the opinion that we are going to object. It's my understanding that they want to have him testify to observations he made of her and statements she made to him. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, and so our contention is that the statements that she made to him are hearsay and should not be allowed in. That under the Noguera case, that much of her state of mind would be irrelevant, and that otherwise the statements are hearsay and should be precluded even under Evidence Code Section 1252, and that his observations of her or his opinion, I think what they want him to say is that it was his opinion that she had a secret. I mean, that's the impression I get from reading their discovery. And that to me is a speculation whose effect would be to cause the jury to further speculate that would have no probative value.
All right, so after the issue of the testimony of these psychiatrists or psychologists who treated Mrs. Menendez, has been resolved either by their testimony or ruling, precluding their testimony or limiting it, whatever results, then it's expected that the defendant, Lyle Menendez, would be testifying. Is that right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And then what is the defense for, what happens after that as far as your defense? Is that you stop and the other defendant picks up, or?
I know, it is, and I have to discuss this with Ms. Abramson, who's been out of town, as the court knows, but what we had preliminarily discussed the other day was that after Lyle testifies, we would put one of our experts on, and we covered a discrete area. And she was concerned about her jury not having anything to do for a while, and so then she would put on the witnesses she was going to call at that point. And we have a few witnesses we cannot call until Lyle Menendez testifies. We'll be recalling Donovan Boudreaux. We have a few other witnesses who really don't become relevant until after he testifies. So there would be a few of those, and then have one other general expert we come on after that. I expect that we have a total, for Lyle Menendez's case, we have a total of about 10 more witnesses, somewhere between 10 and 14.
For his jury only, or just in general?
Most of them will be in front of both juries, some will only be in front of his.
Your concern is that some of these psychiatric or psychological experts that testify after Lyle Menendez would only be testifying before his jury, is that it?
Yes.
Right. And what is the Lyle or the Eric Menendez schedule as of now, if you have one?
We have a few more witnesses to put on. Sorry, Val, but I'm sorry. Okay. We have what I call the anti-Craig Signorelli crowd coming in, which are witnesses.
All right, that'll be sometime after the.
Well, that's going to be this week.
This week?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow. We have Casey Whalen and his mother, whose name is actually Katie Cohen. And here on the list is Katie Whalen. Then we have a friend of Eric's from Princeton to testify. We have one of Eric's tutors from here in California to testify. We have okay, yeah, no, I was about to say, right. And we had two teachers, Eric's from Princeton to testify, and one very brief, look, they're all pretty brief, but one teacher from Beverly Hills High School to testify. So we still have some teachers and one coach. But the coach is mainly being called because he knows Craig Signorelli. He's being called more as a witness to impeach the credibility of Craig Signorelli than to talk about Eric and or his parents.
And this is all expected to be done tomorrow?
No, this is expected to be done between tomorrow, Friday, and Monday. And then we'll have all of,
Well, Monday's a holiday,
I mean, Tuesday afternoon to Wednesday morning.
right? And then the defense for Lyle Menendez would pick up at that point?
Then we jointly do Dr. Cox, Dr. Summerfield, Dr. Emery, the witnesses, Mrs. Menendez's psychiatric care.
All right.
We'll get all these witnesses on before we call Mrs. Menendez's healthcare providers.
All right, well, what we'll do then is, as we proceed, schedule some time to conduct a hearing in regards to the testimony of those three medical personnel dealing with Mrs. Menendez as to whether it's admissible at all or whether there are any limits to its admissibility. And if counsel have any further briefing on the subject other than what you submitted to the court in your motions filed prior to opening statements, I'll consider them. It's my recollection that the defense primarily, or one of their arguments has been that this is somehow character evidence and opinion character evidence. And I didn't quite understand if this was expert opinion or lay opinion or combination of the two. But if there's any further articulation of this subject or case law that either side wishes to bring to the court's attention, you can do that as soon as possible so that we can discuss the matter before the time you have these witnesses brought into court.
We have something we're preparing, we'll provide that to the court by the end of this week.
Okay. Getting back then to the issue relating to the testimony of Mrs. Baralt. A couple observations. The defense position is that she has a long relationship and unique position that qualifies her to testify about these matters. The court did ask counsel prior to many of these witnesses being called by the defense. The court did ask the defense to review these matters to make determinations as to which witnesses to call on these subjects so that we did not get into a cumulative presentation of evidence that the court expected the attorneys for both sides during each side's presentation to review the available evidence and evaluate it to make determinations as to which witnesses were best suited to prove the facts that that side wanted to prove to the jury, and to use some good judgment in editing what is being offered versus what is available, so that we did not have cumulative evidence and repetitive evidence in that regard. There were many other witnesses who have been called on many of these subjects, and it is a correct statement by the prosecution that much of this evidence has already been elicited in one form or another by the defense already. Some of the evidence in particular is evidence that is cumulative and not in dispute and of minimal relevance at best, such as the cleanliness of the house and things of that nature that are clearly things that don't have to be discussed any further. There are others in the offer of proof that are of lesser weight and lesser relevance than others that were presented by the defense, by Ms. Lansing in her presentation. That said, the other side of the coin is that in dealing with cumulative evidence, one of the issues is whether or not there has been sufficient evidence submitted by whichever side is producing the evidence so that the matter is pretty well resolved and that there really isn't a dispute as to certain issues. And what's happened is that the prosecution has cross-examined many of these witnesses called by the defense and questioned their motives, questioned their recollection and things of that nature. So in essence, when the prosecution has done that, the prosecution to some extent necessitates the defense response by calling additional witnesses on some of these matters. It's not for the court to decide the substance of what is being proved here. That's for the jury. The issue for the court to decide is if whether there's repetition, needless repetition, and undue consumption of time. And at this point, because the people have continued to cross-examine and attack the credibility of witnesses who have testified about some of these matters, it seems to me that there is still the right of the defense to put on additional evidence on some of these subjects. We haven't gotten to the stage yet where it's cumulative to the point where the court is going to cut it off. But the court is making that observation with the understanding that the defense is not calling any more witnesses on these subjects and accepts that as the representation of the defense, that is what is going to occur here, that there will not be any further repetition. But as to some of these things that Mrs. Lansing has mentioned here that you're offering, again, I suggest to you that you review that further before asking questions because there are some matters that are cumulative and of little probative value. And even though you presented them to me in your argument, if there are objections to them, the court would sustain them. And one of those had to do with this the housekeeping business, and there are others in that category. So I think even at this stage, you should review your offer and evaluate what is really significant here rather than just whatever is something interesting or that might be of some marginal value that is just repetitious. And I'm not limiting it to that housekeeping, by the way. All right, anything else now before we proceed?
Your Honor, I have one question. The defense may be given an estimate as to what day they think Lyle Menendez will be testifying, since I'm going to be doing this cross-examination. We were originally told they would be testifying at the very end of the trial, and I just wondered what day they think it will be that he's going to testify.
We're planning on Monday, but
You mean Monday the 6th?
no, Monday the 13th.
Oh, okay. But if-
Well, your schedule would indicate it would be before then, from what you're telling me.
I know a number of the witnesses have been called today, have been witnesses that the Lyle Menendez team has called, and so, and Ms. Abrams has some people that she needs to call, so I'm not sure how many people she needs to call. I assume that would take part of the time next week, which is why we were anticipating Monday the 13th. It's a short week.
Well, it's not that short. We start Tuesday afternoon. I don't want to get in a situation where people are padding and bringing in witnesses just to pad things so that you can have a strategic start on fresh on Monday to get one of your witnesses on, even if it's a defendant. If it's a situation where I get the impression that that's what's happening, you could very well end up calling your client Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. And
Part of the schedule was based on the fact that Dr. Summerfield is only available 10th, which is Friday. So
well,
we tried to work around that, so that was part of it. And also, I don't know if Ms. Abrams had time to finalize exactly who she's going to call and when. But so the 13th is what we're aiming for now. Obviously, that could change.
okay, and I take it then if that was your plan, you were anticipating that the Eric Menendez defense was going to call a substantial number of witnesses next week, other than what they've already indicated.
As I understand it, they're figuring out now who they're going to call. I've seen the witness list of tentative witnesses, but we started out with 200 people who we could have called. We turned over a list of 90. We're probably going to put on almost half of that. So we are pulling it down as we go along, and I'm not privy to exactly what the plan is.
Well, all I could say is I don't want to be in a position middle of next week or even Thursday of next week where we have to take a day or half a day's break just to accommodate the testimony of Summerfield on Friday. We don't know if he'll testify at all, and we don't know how long his testimony would be, but if it requires you to start testimony of your client on Thursday and break it for Summerfield, then that's the way it'll have to be. All right, anything else now before the juries come in?
Judge, we have the police report on Hunter Oziel if the court would like to look at that. I've bracketed for the court with a couple of
Okay,
paragraphs.
yeah, you can give that to the clerk.
December 12th.
That's something that the prosecution gave you, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Did you hear anything unusual as you sat in bed that night reading?
Well, I didn't sit, I was lying in bed and I was reading, and at almost, it seemed to me exactly 10 o'clock, I heard pop, 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 and I thought, what kids in the neighborhood are lighting firecrackers this time of night on a Sunday night?
Okay. Now, you've said that it was almost exactly at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
What makes you say that?
Because I have a clock right next to my bed.
Okay.
And I looked at it.
All right. So you looked at the clock and remember seeing 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Mrs. Lord, excuse me, but do you have any hearing problems?
Yes, I do have hearing problems corrected by hearing aids.
Okay. And when you were in bed reading on August 20th at about 10 o'clock, were you wearing your hearing aids?
Mm-hmm.
And you described the noise as pops?
It sounded to me like firecrackers, pops, yes.
Okay, and these were a number of pops that you heard
A
last week?
regular pop, 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 and I can't tell you how many. I never counted them, of course.
Okay. If if those noises that you heard were to be described as a boom, would that be accurate or inaccurate in
I
terms of
think
what you heard?
that's inaccurate.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination?
That's okay, we're shifting.
Mrs. Lord, how long have you lived in that neighborhood?
I've lived in that house 33 years. I
And-
lived in another house on the street before that.
All right, so you've lived in that house for 33 years? Is that yes?
That's how I know about firecrackers, because my children used to light them once in a while.
Okay, so prior to August the 20th of 1989, you had heard firecrackers in your neighborhood, hadn't you?
Prior to that time?
Yeah, prior to the night
Oh,
you heard the
yes.
noises.
Uh-huh.
In spite of the fact that it's Beverly Hills, do people set off firecrackers sometimes, like for the 4th of July?
Well, actually, sometimes there are firecrackers on the 4th of July, and sometimes, in our area, and sometimes not.
Now, when you heard the noises, did they appear to come all at the same time, or was there any pause in any of the shots that you
As
or
I
the-
said, they were irregular, but as far as 4 years ago, I couldn't tell you exactly.
Have you ever met either of the two defendants who are here in court?
I've never seen them before in my life, no.
And after you heard these noises that night, did you call the police?
No, because I thought they were firecrackers and they stopped, so I continued reading.
Did you hear any other noises before you heard the firecrackers?
Nothing.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
No additional questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You're
Thank you.
excused. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Your next witness?
Terry Baralt.
Charts here.
All right, if you would stand right behind this court reporter over here and face the court clerk, please. Raise your right hand.
Sworn, you solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause and opinion before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please. Would you tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Yes, Teresita Baralt, B-A-R-A-L-T.
Could you spell your first name as well?
T-E-R-E-S-I-T-A.
Mrs. Baralt. Are you the sister of Jose Menendez and the sister-in-law of Kitty Menendez?
Yes, I am.
And we have a family tree up here. And can you find yourself on the family tree?
Right here.
And your husband's name is Carlos?
Yes,
And you have 4 daughters, Sylvia, Christina, Alicia, and Ana Maria?
yes, no age.
Sorry about that. And Jose was your brother, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
Younger or older?
I'm the oldest. He was the youngest.
And Marta is your
It's the middle
sister?
one, yes.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes,
were you born in Cuba?
yes, I was.
And was your brother Jose born in Cuba as well?
Yes, all three of us were.
Marta as well?
Mhm.
And when did you come here from Cuba?
November 1960,
And when did your brother Jose come here?
October the 7th, 1960.
And when he came here, were you and he living in close proximity to each other?
When he came over, he came with my husband to be at the time. Okay, I was still in Cuba, and he lived in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, with Carlos and his family. I lived in Illinois with Carlos's parents, and we were not married. So it's,
Okay.
okay.
At what point in time did you begin to live close to your brother Jose?
Okay, I came in 3 days before my wedding, which was June 24th, 1961. Jose came to live with us first week in July. And he lived with us until January that he went to Southern Illinois to school.
And over the period from 1960 till August of 1989, a period of almost 29 years, what period of time did you live either in the same house or within 15 minutes of him?
14 and a half years.
And did you see him and his family on a regular basis?
Very often.
If you look up at the chart up there,
Okay.
you will see that we have a number of the homes that they lived in listed. Did you live near them when they lived in Wexford Terrace in New York?
No, we were at the time in Evansville, Indiana.
What about when they lived in Cedar Grove, New Jersey?
They moved there because we were living there.
So you lived near them then?
Around a mile.
What about at the Hinsdale home in Illinois?
We lived across the street, and we moved there because they were living there.
Okay. And when they lived in Muncie, New York, did you live nearby?
No, we had stayed in Hinsdale, Illinois, and they moved to Muncie. When we were transferred back to Princeton, they sold their house in Muncie, and they came to live in Princeton.
During the period of time they were living in Muncie, New York, did you ever visit them at their house?
Very much so. Very often, yes.
How often would you visit them?
Well, we spent Christmas together. I would come to the East Coast because my parents were also here. And summertime, I would make sure that the children came. We would stay mainly with my parents who lived in New Jersey. And but saw them daily. I would come for maybe 3 weeks, and then I always tried to bring the children in the middle of the winter to see their grandparents.
Did you spend holidays together, birthdays, Easter, Thanksgiving?
You mean during all those years?
During the years they were in Muncie?
Yes, we tried to do Christmas and Thanksgiving for sure. And then we took a vacation to Hilton Head for a week. We'd liked to vacation together, so we did that often.
Now, when they moved into the Princeton Junction house, were you living nearby?
I was living at the time in Hopewell, and we had chosen 2 lots in the Princeton Junction area. It didn't materialize because they didn't get, the builder didn't get the ordinance. And at that time, I had started my children at the high school there. I had high school kids. Their kids were small. And then we bought 2 lots, one across the street from each other on the house, the other house, not the Princeton Junction, but the Pennington house. But I had high school kids. You don't move them around.
Okay.
So we bought a house in the West Windsor area and stay there. So that's only 15 minutes away.
Okay. When they lived in the Princeton Junction, are you a little nervous?
I'm very nervous.
Okay. When they lived in the Princeton
Yes.
Junction house, did you live nearby them?
Yes, around 10 minutes.
Okay. And when they lived in the Pennington house, how far away did you live?
Reverse. They moved to where we were coming from.
Okay.
So it was around 10, 15 minutes away.
And when they bought the Mountain Avenue home, that's still in the same area, I take it? So you were still
Closer.
close?
It was closer than to our house.
And in 1986, when they moved to California, you remained in New Jersey?
We're still in the same place. We've lived in that house for 15 years.
When you were living in the Hinsdale house, were Lyle and Eric born at that point in time?
Oh, yes. Lyle was around 3, and Eric was born They moved there in November of 1970. Eric was born in November of 1970. They moved 2 weeks after Eric was born. We joined them the following summer. And by that time, I think Lyle was 3 and Eric was 7 or 8 months by the time we moved there.
And were you in touch with the Menendez family during the time that they were first in Hinsdale before you moved there, in terms of how the kids were doing, what was going on with them? Did you talk on the phone?
We talked often.
How often? Once a day, once a week, once a month?
Probably once a week during that time until, Carlos went to work with Jose in Hinsdale. I mean, yeah, in that area, in the Chicago area. And we moved there.
Were you getting reports about Lyle's progress as a baby?
Yes.
And did there seem to be a lot of family pride in his doing things early?
Lyle was a very fast baby. He stood up at 5 by himself. He walked at 7 or 8 months. Everything he did, he rode his bike by 3.5, no training wheels. I mean, this kid was coordinated, to say the least.
Okay. And were you getting reports regularly about his progress?
Oh, yes.
And did it seem to be
Well, they were very proud of him, and they had reason to be.
Your Honor, may I mark the photograph I've shown these to the prosecution as next in order?
201.
Showing you what I've marked as 201. Do you recognize that photograph?
I hadn't seen it before, but I recognized the baby.
Okay, this is the baby.
Lyle.
Okay. And were you given photographs that sort of marked his progress along those lines in terms of when he stood up and that type of thing?
I wasn't given the photographs, but I certainly did see them.
And showing you what I've previously marked as 150. I'd ask you to look at that photograph and see if you recognize it. Find one of my glasses.
Yeah. This is Lyle and the steps in his house.
His house where?
Hinsdale.
And is there another house in the photograph?
Yeah, that's my home.
Okay, so he's standing in front of his house, which you can't see. Is that correct?
You can't see his home, but I recognize the steps.
Okay, and you can see your home.
No. Well, I can see the back of my home, yes.
Okay. And was there something unusual that happened on a regular basis with regard to Eric and going to your home?
Well, Eric would wake up early in the morning, still in his diapers, get out of the house, and go and bang on my back door. She's right here. I would open the door, and there would be Eric, 1.5 years, less, with his diapers halfway down his legs. So I would call Kitty and said, Kitty, Eric is here. Terry, impossible. Eric is in bed. I said, well, go check because I have somebody else's child here. Day in, day out.
How many times do you think this happened?
Gosh, I don't know. It was a habit by then.
Do you think it happened 20 times?
15?
50?
15, yeah, somewhere around there.
And did it cause you any concern because he had to cross the street to get to you? Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you ever discuss with Kitty the fact that this might be dangerous if this child is crossing the street?
We did discuss it, and
She seemed to be concerned. That can cause speculation.
Sustained.
Did she indicate that she was concerned about this? Did she say anything to indicate she was concerned?
well, I think it was more embarrassment of the fact that 1.5-year-old could just walk out of the house without her knowing about it. I mean, it happens once, but so often.
and Jose married?
1963.
And were you around them when they were first married?
I was around them not that often because when they married, they went to New York, and I was living in Evansville, Indiana, and I had 3 little ones to take care of. So I saw them. At the time, I didn't have 3 little ones. I had 2 and another one on the way. But I saw them, like I said, I always went in February for around 3 weeks to my parents. So I saw them there. I saw them for Christmas, the holidays.
Did you witness fights between them?
Yes,
Did you have an opportunity to see Kitty's temper?
yes.
Did she have a bad temper?
Kitty had a temper.
Did you ever see her physically strike her husband?
While he was driving a car I was sitting in, yes.
And she just reach over and tap him, or?
Well, they were having an argument, and she was very exasperated, and she just started hitting him. And
fists.
yeah, that was a normal reaction for Kitty, just to close her fist and just get very upset. And so he drove with the left hand while he held her hands with the right. And then she calmed down.
Did you
But
ever see her strike him on any other occasion?
no, that was the only time in front of me.
When, after they were married, did Jose continue going to school?
Jose was 2 years younger. He was only 19 when they married.
And when did he graduate?
He worked full-time and went to school at night. And I think he graduated in either 65 or 66.
So when Lyle Menendez was born in 1968, he would have been working full-time and not going to school, is that correct?
Yes, he was out of school already.
Where was he working?
I think it was Libran, Coopers and Libran.
And what was he working,
He was, one of his degrees was in accounting. He graduated with 2 degrees. And he needed 3 years in an accounting firm in order for his CPA to come through. He had taken the exam, he had passed it, but you have to pay your dues. And so he had worked there like 3 years as an accountant. Auditing, I think, is what he was doing.
Okay, so at the time Lyle Menendez was born, he was working full-time as an accountant.
I think so.
It might have been a number of years.
I think
Is
so.
that correct?
I think so.
Like to mark next in order, Your Honor,
202.
202?
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Ask if you recognize this photograph.
By the way, this is not my house.
Okay, which is your house?
It's over here.
Oh, all right.
See the difference?
So this is your house and this
Yes.
photograph with the bicycle.
This is why I looked at it and okay.
Perhaps you
This
can
is
identify the photograph she was pointing to as not being her house.
Okay,
Photograph number 150, her house is to the right of the house.
to the right of that one.
Okay, the photograph shows a house that's not your house.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yours is to the right of it.
Yeah, mine is to the right.
Okay, and the photograph with Lyle on the bicycle
Exactly,
shows your house.
exactly. See, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
My house would be directly this way.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, this is Lyle. He's, 4 at the most.
And he's on a two-wheel bicycle
Yeah.
with no training wheels?
I don't remember ever seeing Lyle on training wheels.
So he started out on a two-wheeler with no training wheels? And next in order would be 203, Your Honor?
Okay.
Can you identify that for me?
Yes, I recognize the chair. This was taken at my mother's house.
You recognize the
That's
children?
Lyle and Eric as a baby. This must have been before they went to, they moved to Illinois, when Eric was born.
Now,
When they were little, very little, when Eric was first born, did they seem to have a good relationship? Or did
Eric and Lyle?
Yes. Did there seem to be some jealousy?
No. I would say it was a very typical relationship of a 3-year difference between siblings.
What do you mean by that?
I think Lyle was a little jealous of Eric, especially of the attention that Eric was getting from his mom.
Did Eric get more attention from his mother than Lyle got from his mother?
There was no question.
Pardon me. As to
Sorry.
the time, like what time period?
All right, objection sustained. You can rephrase the question.
When Eric was born,
Mhm.
and while Lyle was very young, did you see some, what appeared to be jealousy?
Between the children.
Yes.
Yes.
And why did that appear to be?
Objection, irrelevant, cause for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you see a difference in the amount of attention that Kitty gave Eric versus the amount of attention that she gave Lyle?
Objection, vague, time.
The same time period, Your Honor.
Yes. Kitty, whether she was more prepared to be for motherhood when Eric was born, there was a difference. I think Kitty had a rapport with Eric. Kitty never had a rapport with Lyle. I know that sounds awful, but that's the way I saw it.
And as the boys grew older in their teenage years, did you still see the same jealousy, or did the relationship change?
No. They became very good friends. I don't know whether it was.
Okay, I think you've answered the question.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Your next question, please.
You had told us about the incident of, or the repeated incidents of Eric crossing the street to your house.
Yes.
Was there an attitude demonstrated by Kitty that her kids should be fearless, and as a result, she did not protect them as much as you thought she might have?
Objection, sound found in meeting.
Sustained.
Was Kitty a protective mother?
No.
And were you aware of some instances in which the children were exposed to situations you considered to be dangerous?
Yes, but that was Kitty's theory.
What was Kitty's theory?
We discussed that many times. She thought I was very overprotective. She thought that children, when you leave them alone, they learn to defend themselves. And that it's on an everyday situation.
Was there an incident in which you were having a conversation with her shortly after Lyle had had some surgery as a young child?
No, I didn't have what do you mean by that? Specify that,
okay.
Yeah.
Did Lyle Menendez have surgery as a young child for a hernia?
For a hernia, right here on the stomach. Okay. Yes.
And did you have a conversation with Kitty right after he had the hernia operation?
Yes.
And was she letting Lyle do something you thought was dangerous?
Well, Kitty related this story to me. Okay. She said that.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm going to object to being here, say that.
Okay.
Sustained.
Was this going on? Was she relating the story to you as the event was taking place?
After it took place.
Okay. And was it regarding something that she had just permitted Lyle to do, which you thought was dangerous?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell us what that was?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained. It's hearsay.
I'd like to show you what I've now marked as 203, Your Honor.
I think we have 203. Is this a new exhibit? Okay, it'll be 204.
Do you recognize the boy and the dog?
Yes, that's Lyle.
And who's the dog?
I don't know which one of the Airedales this one is. I don't know whether this is Ken or George.
Okay. Was there an incident involving Lyle and an Airedale named George?
Yes, he bit Lyle on the cheek.
Okay. Now, was this dog known to be a good dog for kids to be around?
No.
Objection, cause for speculation on the foundation.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Were people careful about
not letting small children around George?
We have some foundation, at the very least, as to who the owner of the dog was.
The kitties, who owned George?
Kitty's father,
And were small children supposed to be permitted around George?
no,
Why not?
because they raised the Airedales. They themselves, the ones that they had, were raised to protect them. They had a summer camp in Canada. And at night, and I'm telling you because I was there with my kids, and after 9 o'clock, you couldn't leave the cottage because the dogs would be allowed loose in the camp. And this is what's their protection. So these Airedales were raised so that anything make them snap. They were used to adults and certain adults. I mean, you just didn't get close to them.
And did Kitty let Lyle get close to them in spite of that warning?
Brought them to the house. George came as the family pet. Well, it didn't last long.
What happened to Lyle?
He has a scar to prove it.
That's the scar on his right cheek?
Mm-hmm.
Did that happen when he was 3 years old?
He was 3. The dog was bigger than he was.
And did they then take a relative of George as a pet?
Can. Yes.
And was Can of the similar disposition?
Oh, yes.
All right, you've answered the question.
Yeah.
For another one.
Was this a dog you would let your children be around?
My kids were terrified of Can.
And was that Lyle's dog, that was the dog he was expected to play with?
That was the family pet.
And was this sort of a source of pride with Kitty that her son could be around this dangerous dog? That's irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did Kitty ever try to keep her children from being around this dog who was dangerous?
No.
Was the dog eventually destroyed?
Well, when they moved to Muncie, the dog went with them. The dog mauled to death a little dog that somebody was walking on a leash and attacked a couple of people. So they gave the dog to somebody who owned a farm, and eventually the dog had to be put to sleep.
There's been some testimony about private talks that Jose would have with Lyle Menendez. Did you witness any such talks in your house during the years in which Lyle was in college?
Yes.
And where would those talks take place?
Well, Jose did not like to reprimand his kids in public.
Where would
And to the basement. The basement is an office in my house. Okay.
And so it would be private.
Yes.
And after one of these talks, was there some discussion about the fact that Jose had notes and Lyle didn't, and this was the subject of some concern?
Lyle.
We have
was
a
the one.
foundation as to who is speaking when you say a discussion.
Did Lyle say something about having gone into that meeting with his father without notes?
Yes. Lyle said to me, he said, would you believe Dad came to talk to me all prepared, notes and all. Yes.
And was it of some concern to Lyle that he didn't have notes? Objection irrelevant.
Objection overruled on that ground.
I think he fell at a disadvantage.
After the family moved to the West Coast in 1986, Lyle remained back in New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes.
And did he spend a great deal of time at your house?
Lyle lived in my house 90% of the time. He had room and board at the university, but he liked staying in my house.
And did that seem to be a subject of some concern with parents that he was spending so much time with you?
I think Kitty was bothered by it. I don't think Jose was as bothered. I think Kitty was bothered by it. She kept on saying he has room and board paid at the university. Why does he stay there? She was very possessive of her children, and I think she felt.
Pardon me, I will just strike everything.
Okay.
At this point, Your Honor, the question already been answered. Was she possessive?
All right, there has been an objection, so the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. You can re-ask the question.
Thank you. Was Kitty possessive of her children?
Yes.
And did she seem to prevent anybody getting close to them?
Calls for concluding the speculation line foundation.
Sustained.
During the time that the family was living on the West Coast and Lyle was living in New Jersey, would Kitty ever call and see how Lyle was doing?
Overall,
Yes.
How
Between.
often did she call?
Okay. Kitty called me every single day around 4 o'clock California time, 7 o'clock. The reason this is so much in my mind is because it was dinner time for us. And
okay, you've answered the question.
Did this happen in fact every day?
yes,
And what was the purpose of the call?
gather information about Lyle.
And did Jose call you also about Lyle?
Jose called once, maybe twice a week around, but his call was at 2 o'clock.
So he also called once or twice a week and asked you about Lyle, what he was doing.
Exactly.
Did they seem to ask a lot of questions, detailed questions about?
Jose
friends,
didn't.
But Kitty did?
Kitty did.
And in addition to these phone calls, did Jose and Kitty ever come back to visit?
Very often.
What's very often?
Okay. Jose would be in probably once or twice a month. And Kitty normally came with him.
And would they bring Eric along?
No.
So
Eric was left home by himself.
after Kitty and Jose died, Lyle spent a lot of money. Is that correct?
Yes.
Lyle spent a lot of money before they died?
Lyle always spent a lot of money.
And what did he spend money on?
Anything.
We have a definition as to time frame here.
Okay. Say, from the time that he was a teenager, was he spending money as a teenager, buying things?
Yes. Lyle is a generous kid. If you're a friend, he'll buy you the world or give it to you. And yes, his friends always had all kinds of things. Lyle bought me this, Lyle bought me that. And if they went to a restaurant, Lyle paid.
Did he have a credit card?
I imagine he did. I'm not, that I wasn't. I knew he had a signature on his parents' account with a $6,000 credit line, which he used.
And did he have do you seem to have access to a checking account?
That was a checking account, yes.
Okay. And was it a sort of a topic of family conversation, the fact that Lyle always spent a lot of money?
Sustained.
Did you ever have any discussions with his mother or father about the fact that he always spent a lot of money?
Yes.
Did Kitty like to go shopping?
Sustained.
Did you ever go shopping with Kitty?
Yes.
And did you go shopping with her at times when the children were brought along?
Yes.
And when Kitty would go shopping, did she like to spend a lot of money also? Or buy a lot of things?
Yes. Kitty was, I don't know what the word would be, but somebody who, compulsive buyer, okay.
Now, on any of these instances, when you went shopping, did you take along Eric and Lyle when they were young?
Yes, I did.
And were there any situations in which Kitty was paged while you were shopping?
Only once.
Okay. What happened?
And, well, she didn't hurry. I mean, at least she knew where they were. To me, that was...
Did the boys disappear?
Well, the boys went in, and this was everybody take off in their different directions, and she went shopping. And then when they were paged, that she knew where they were.
Okay, so she got paged, your children, Mrs. Menendez, your children are at the information booth or at security or something like that?
There was one instance when we couldn't find Lyle. And we found Lyle in a shop down the block on an ice cream place, eating an ice cream. Well, the owner figured that parent would come at some point. He had kept the kid there feeding him ice cream. It was quite a bill.
The time when she was paged, how old was he when he was down the street eating ice cream?
Young, 4 or 5. Not much older than that.
The time when she gets paged in the shopping mall,
Yeah.
how old are the kids?
I don't remember. They were young. I mean, you don't page a parent unless the child is very young.
And when she was paged, how did she react?
Now we know where they are.
She continued shopping?
Yes.
Was Kitty Menendez good with animals?
Kitty was wonderful with animals.
Was she caring?
She was caring. She loved them.
Was she gentle?
Very.
Was she kind?
Yes, and seemed to understand them. Amazing.
Did you ever see her show to her children the same kind of compassion you saw her show to animals?
No, she was, it was very strange because she was a different person with the animals.
In what way?
She really cared for the animals. Okay, it's like kids don't need it, but the animals do. It's like somebody who is an animal lover, you know, and not necessarily a kid person.
I have some other photographs I'd like to show you.
Okay.
I'd like to mark these as 4 additional photos.
Starting at 2:05.
Mrs. Baralt, I'd like to show you the photographs I've now marked as 205 through 208 and ask you if you recognize the people and the house.
Okay. This picture.
First, do you recognize the house?
I think the house, you know, because of the people who are also in the house, this is the Hinsdale house. And I will tell you why. My brother-in-law lived down the block from us, okay? The children. No, this is not the fancy house. This is a Muncie house.
Okay.
This is a Muncie house.
New York.
Yeah, because these are the curtains that she had in the Muncie house. Yeah.
This is 205. They're all photographs of the same location.
Yeah.
And do you see Lyle and Eric in there?
Yes. There's Lyle and there's Eric.
And showing you the other pictures which we've marked as 206,
Yeah.
207, and 208, do they appear to all be taken the same day because everybody's wearing the same clothes?
Yes, and it appears to be somewhere around Easter time.
And does it appear that Eric had some sort of injury to his face?
Yes.
Do you have any
I have no idea how he got it.
memory of, was it unusual to have him have an injury?
It had to have been a very fresh one because Eric healed in 24 hours.
Did Eric get a lot of injuries?
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
No, I only recall one he had over the eyebrow in a store. And obviously that one, but I don't remember that one.
And there was no discussion about it in particular that stands out in your mind?
No.
That day?
No big deal would have been made of it anyway.
Why?
Well, because Kitty considered that a part of growing up.
Getting injuries?
Yeah, it's scraped like that. It's okay.
Was it important to Kitty that her children not show fear?
Very much so.
Was there an incident in which Eric was left home alone and called you?
Well, Eric was left home alone often. The day that he called me, it was a storm and they lost power.
About how old was he?
Around 8.
And what happened when he called you?
Well, he called and my oldest one, he must have been, around 8.5 because she was 17 and just starting to drive. She went over and stayed with him.
Was he frightened?
He was very frightened.
And so your oldest one is Sylvia?
Sylvia.
Okay, so Sylvia went over and stayed with him. And did you have any discussion with Kitty about that?
Kitty was very upset.
Why?
She was very angry because she felt he should have handled the situation. Kitty didn't understand fear, didn't accept it from the boys. It was not, you're not afraid. I mean, simply, regardless of the age.
Was that true with her also? She was not afraid?
She wasn't, no.
Did Eric ever call you again when he was home alone and frightened?
He knew better.
Was there an incident at a theme park where Eric was not brave enough to go on a ride?
Well, it wasn't even a ride. We had gone, they were around 6, and I have one that is 3 months younger than Eric. And we had taken Lyle, Eric, and Anna Maria to the amusement park. And it's like you go into this tent and there's all kinds of, it's like a trampoline, but not really a trampoline. The only thing is that you lose your balance, and that was part of the fun. Well, Eric didn't like that. Didn't like it at all. He refused to go in. Kitty was fit to be tied because a little girl had gone in and he wouldn't.
And how did she show that she was fit to be tied?
We heard about it all the way to the car.
What was she saying?
I don't think what you have to be afraid of. Look, even a little girl goes in. Why should it? She just didn't accept it. I mean, that's all there is to it.
How did Eric look during all this?
Oh, I think Eric wanted to die. He cried. He cried but did not go in. He stood his ground.
Did your brother have to raise his voice to let people know he was displeased with them?
No, Jose did not need to raise his voice or be violent for that matter.
Was there something about his voice or his presence that could be very effective without yelling?
An adult is always an impressive figure on a child. An adult that whose the tone of voice and the body language tells a kid exactly, what they should be afraid of. He could be harsh. He could say the things in a way that make you feel like you want to disappear. I saw him do it to a lot of people. He never did it to me.
Would he do it to adults?
Oh, easily. He could put an adult back in its place that person wants to die. Yes, he had that ability. He was very articulate and he didn't raise his voice. In fact, the angrier he got, the lower his voice got and the slower he spoke. By the time he finished with you.
Did you call it once a cut you to shreds tone of voice?
Yes, and I used to tell him.
Did you ever say to your brother or to Kitty, I don't approve of how you're raising your children. I think you should change some things?
I didn't tell him to change it. We discussed raising kids. We did not agree. At the time, neither point was proven. They couldn't prove that I was wrong. I couldn't prove that they were wrong.
What would have happened if you really pushed the issue about they should do things differently?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you ever push the issue?
No,
Why?
Well, because when you live either close to friends or family, the first thing you have to have is respect for their ways. I did not see them being abusive to the children. They just saw their ways of parenting to be completely different from mine. But those were their kids. Maybe their ways would have been better. It wasn't proven so.
In terms of their type of parenting, you're talking about the fearlessness, exposure to danger. Is there also a competition factor that was different?
There was a lot of pressure in that household. Okay, there was a lot of pressure to excel. Whatever you did, you have to be the best at it. Trying was not good enough. And to grow up with that amount of pressure is very hard on children. They also had, their schedule was such that there was no time to go outside and play. Every minute of their day was accounted for, and always intensely.
Wait for another question.
I'm sorry.
Did you see a change in the relationship between Kitty and Jose after they moved to California?
I thought it was the California air. They looked like honeymooners, and I had no idea what it was. We all talked about it. He was extremely gentle with her, like when you are afraid to say anything, his tone of voice, his way. I thought California did it.
He didn't move. Did you help Lyle clean out his room at the dorm in Princeton in June of 1989?
I most certainly did.
And was your mother helping you as well?
My mother and I had to go and pack him. He had that day to get out. He was also catching a flight back to California. And it was the end of the school year. So my mother and I went over and organized that Lyle was. Everything was everywhere. So we helped pack. Yes.
Do you know who Donovan Goudreau is?
Oh, yes.
And how is it that you know Donovan?
Well, he was a close friend of Lyle's for a while, and they lived in my house.
Did you get to know Donovan pretty well?
Yes.
Did he appear to be Lyle's closest friend?
At the time, he was.
Did you get to know someone else named Glenn Stevens?
Yes.
And was Glenn a close friend of Lyle's?
Glenn liked to think so. I don't think he was. I think he was just somebody who was there with a group of close friends, but not Lyle's close friend, no.
When you were cleaning out the dorm room, did you come across anything that belonged to Donovan Goudreau?
His driver's license.
And did you come across anything else that belonged
There were a lot of papers in there, and I showed them to Lyle, and I said, Lyle, this is Donovan's driver's license. And he said, yeah, Aunt Terry, when he left all his things behind, all his important papers behind.
And were these in a drawer? Or
they were on the floor, like with everything else. And I said, well, do you want me to take it? He says, no, I'll give it to him at some point. And he took all that.
Did you see any other papers of Donovan's that were there?
There were a bunch of papers that were Donovan's. I just didn't go and look into it. No.
Okay. Did they appear to be set aside for safekeeping in any way?
They were on the floor.
Objection overruled. Your answer was what?
On the floor.
During the time that you knew Glenn Stevens, did you know him to be wearing a Rolex watch, which had been given to him by Lyle?
He was not given a Rolex watch. He was asked to hold the Rolex watch. I asked him for it. He said, Lyle told me to save it for him because it may come as evidence in the future. This was when Lyle was apprehended. And I said, Glenn, I think that you should leave the watch here. And and after that, we tried.
Did he ever give it back?
No, he did not. They didn't even return our calls.
When Jose would be visiting at your house, would he get calls from Kitty?
Especially when they were in California, yes.
How often would she call him when he was there visiting?
Overall.
Okay, if he was there, he would arrive there. Jose normally stayed at the Nassau Inn on campus to be closer to Lyle. And if he would come and stay in my house like a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, Kitty would call at least 3 or 4 times in those 2 hours.
During the period of time that you knew him, was there some concern on her part with regard to his fidelity?
During the time that I knew them?
Yes.
Yes, but she had that concern since the moment she married. She was paranoid about Jose ever having an affair.
And was there a time in early 1980 in which she moved out because of that?
Yes.
And where did she and her children go?
No, the children didn't go anywhere. The children stayed home.
So she just left?
She left. She moved to a hotel.
And they subsequently got back together, I take it?
Yes.
Did you know anything about what Kitty Menendez's travel plans were in August of 1989?
Travel plans?
Yes. Was she going to go anywhere?
Well, they went to the Nationals in the beginning of August.
Is that in Michigan?
Kalamazoo, Michigan,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. Then I know that September the 9th, she was going to be in Princeton to help Lyle set up his apartment in Princeton. I know that she had to be back by the 24th of September because she had to set Eric up in college. And the 14th of October, we were going to Hawaii together, the 4 of us.
Did she ever talk to you about any plans to go to South America?
Not to me.
Did you talk to her every day?
During that time, I talked to her. I had gone to Chicago in the beginning of August, and I had 3 messages from her in the hotel. We never connected. We did after she came back from Kalamazoo, and I talked to her a few times, mainly because we were setting up the fact that she was coming over to set up Lyle's condo and thinking about what kind of furniture, etc. So yes, we did talk about it.
Now, was this a new condominium that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were buying for Lyle?
Yes.
And it was to be ready for him to move into early September?
Well, the closing was supposed to have been September 4th.
When were they in escrow on it then during the summer in August when you were talking to her about her plans?
Okay. Lyle was going back to Princeton. Okay. And in July, do I answer? Do I wait?
Why don't you wait so I can hear what you say?
Were you given any instructions with regard to having a key to that condo?
Yes.
And what were you to do with the key to the condo?
Well, Kitty and I had a discussion on that, and I told her she was placing me in a very, very difficult position.
What did Kitty want you to do?
She wanted me to,
Sorry.
You wish to be heard?
I'll do the foundation if I can, Your Honor. Did Kitty express to you some concern over a girlfriend that Lyle had at that time?
Jamie, yes.
And did she like or dislike her?
She didn't like Jamie.
And did she want you to do something to make sure that Jamie did not spend time at the condominium?
She wanted me to get a spare key to the apartment, which probably I would have had. But what she wanted me to do is to go in and check and make sure that she was not living there.
And what if she found out that, what if you found out that she was living there? Were you to report that?
She's dead.
Did she tell you what to do if you
Yes.
found out? What did she tell you?
She wanted to know immediately. It was a 2-bedroom suite. Okay, one of the bedrooms was going to be for them whenever they came into the Princeton area. But she wanted to make sure that Jamie was not there.
Did you refuse to do that?
Well, I told her she was placing me in a very, very uncomfortable position, mainly because I was very close to Lyle and I felt like a traitor. And so she said, well, we'll discuss that at some other time. But with Kitty, it was very hard to say no to Kitty.
Why?
Because Kitty didn't accept no for an answer. And whenever you stuck to your ground, that means there was going to be a problem. I mean, she just didn't accept a no for an answer.
Was she controlled by her husband? In those last years,
Okay.
last 3 to 5 years that you were around them, did it appear that Jose had total control over Kitty?
The world liked to think so. That was not so. She just learned to be very good in public. Like there were no more open fights. She just stayed quiet. But not in private, because when private meant many times we were there, Carlos and I. She held her ground.
Was she strong?
Oh, Kitty had an opinion. There's no question about it.
Was there any issue with regard to Kitty's drinking toward the end, the last 3 to 5 years?
That was always kept from me. I did not know that she had a drinking problem.
Did you ever see her drink around you and ask you not to let Jose know?
Okay. Whenever they came to the East Coast, she would come over to our house early and stay the afternoon, and Jose will come after work around 7 o'clock. So we would sit where I'll fix dinner, and we would have a cup of coffee. Her cup of coffee always included half a cup of Galliano.
Is that a liqueur?
I don't know what that is. It's a big bottle.
But I mean, it's alcohol.
Like a wine and liqueur type. And she enjoyed that. When Jose came, she says, put it away. He doesn't like it when I drink. But I assume, and this is my assumption, that...
Pardon me, I think.
Okay.
Your next question. Your next question, please.
Did Lyle spend time at your home even as a little child? You said he did in college. Did he spend time at your home as a little child?
Sometimes, but always with the family. Except when they lived across the street and he used to come often.
Did you get to have time alone with Eric?
Not as much. Not as much. They moved to California when Eric was around 13 or 14. And at that time, a child doesn't drive.
And when you would see Lyle, would he ever spend the night at your house?
Sometimes they did. They both did. I used to give them one of the girls' bedrooms, beds with 2 beds. And many times they would come back at 2 o'clock in the morning whenever we got back. And Jose will carry both boys asleep to the car.
So they didn't spend the night really very often?
Not very often.
Did Lyle have any stuffed animals he'd bring with him?
Lyle had a stuffed animal. There was no space for Lyle in the bed.
Did they seem to be important to him?
Very much so.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Any examination on behalf of Eric Menendez?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few minutes.
All right, let's do it now.
Thank you. Actually, I could use a few minutes if I can get there.
All right.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right, I believe we have everybody here now. You may conduct your examination of the witness.
Mrs. Baralt, I want to turn your attention back to Hinsdale, Illinois.
Okay.
There's this photograph here. Number 202, which shows tip it a little bit so that you can see it and so that the gold jury can see it.
Okay.
Okay, this photograph here, this shows the street that separates the lot behind your house
Mhm.
from the Menendez house, correct?
Yes, correct.
So you describe now a pattern of behavior by Eric Menendez when he was about 18 months old, where he would show up at your back door.
Mhm.
About
Yes.
what time of day would he show up?
Between 6:45 and 7 o'clock in the morning.
And in order to get to the back door of your house that's shown in that photograph from his house, he'd have to cross, first of all, that grassy vacant lot.
He had to get out of his crib.
Has to get out of his crib and out of his room.
Yes.
And is this a two-story house that the Menendez?
It was a split level.
And is his room up a level or on?
All the bedrooms were on the top floor.
So he has to get out of his crib and he's got to go down some stairs, correct?
Exactly.
And he has to get out a door that leads to the outside.
The front door.
And was your understanding he was leaving through the front door?
Through the front door, yes.
And then he had to go down. Was the house raised above ground level?
No.
We'll try to find.
Okay. There, you see the steps here? He would get out of the house.
You're pointing to a picture on the right.
Here.
Let me get
Okay.
a number so that the record.
The door would be facing this way. So he would get out and he wouldn't use that. He would go straight down the lawn, cross the street and go straight.
Okay, this is 150. See if I can do this so that Julie can see. So there's a set, the door actually, there's like a enclosed, glass enclosed front.
The whole house was a very modern house and it was all glass.
You could see, glass all the way up.
It was like a two-story entryway, is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, and there was like a vestibule with a glass wall, and that would lead
Yes.
to that was the front door.
That was the front door.
And the opening to the vestibule led to these steps.
Yeah, exactly.
So at a year and a half, Eric would walk out and down those steps and across the lawn.
Across the lawn over here, straight into my house. There would be a path by then that he had made.
Well, the path would be in this grassy vacant lot. right?
Exactly.
But to get from the lawn or the steps of his house to that vacant lot, he had to cross the street.
Oh yeah, that street over there.
And that's a street on which the cars would go to get to the houses in that development, right?
Yes.
Now, it was your habit and custom, I take it, when Eric would show up at your door to call back to your brother's house
Yes,
to let them know that the baby was at your house.
exactly.
And would this behavior of Eric's occur during the winter as well as other times of year?
Well, it occurs mainly in the spring, but remember the spring in Illinois
Is cold.
Yes.
And when Eric would show up at your door, he'd be wearing a diaper that was slipped down.
Well, he would be out of bed. Babies wake up. At the time, the diapers were not like they are now, fancy and tight.
They slipped.
They slipped.
And he was wearing, I take it, no shoes.
Oh, no shoes and just a shirt.
Just like a little undershirt top.
Either undershirt or a pajama top or anything like that.
Would there be days when he showed up at your door, he was wet and muddy from the lot?
If it had rained the day before. Yes, or if it was raining, I mean,
He'd come in
They-
the rain?
yes.
And when you would call your brother's house, most often was it your sister-in-law who answered the phone?
Kitty was who answered, and Kitty was mainly who came.
You would tell her that Eric was at your house. She'd say, no, he's in his crib.
She'd say, Terry, it's 6:45. Eric is sleeping. I said, then I have somebody else's child here.
And did she seem embarrassed when she would come and pick him up?
More frustrated.
Frustrated?
Yes.
Would she say anything to Eric?
It's limited what you can say to an 18-month-old, like, Eric, you shouldn't leave the house without telling mommy. Went in one ear, out the other.
Okay, so she would give this little lecture to him, and yet he'd show up again at your house.
Yeah, next day.
And in fact, you said at some point a path was beaten through the grass.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Now, you said that Kitty Menendez treated Eric as a baby and toddler differently than she had treated Lyle. Is that correct?
That was my observation, yes.
Okay. Tell me what kinds of signs of physical affection you saw between Kitty Menendez and Eric when Eric was an infant or a toddler.
Okay. Eric was extremely attached to his mother. Okay. And Kitty was not an affectionate person with the kids. But she would have kind of when you look at a child condescendingly. Okay, that was the relationship. That relationship wasn't there with Lyle at all.
Okay, so you saw, let me see if I understand it. You saw Kitty Menendez give condescending looks to Eric when he was a baby. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Is that what you saw?
Yeah, if that's the right word to describe somebody who just.
Okay. But you didn't even see her give condescending looks to Lyle when Lyle was a baby.
I wasn't around Lyle as much that first year of his life, okay? But the rapport between her and Lyle was never there.
Nothing was there.
No, that's why he had it with me. You find it somewhere else.
Okay, but let me back up to between her and Eric. You didn't see her hug Eric, did you?
I don't remember seeing it, no.
You didn't see her kiss Eric?
I don't remember seeing it.
You didn't see her carrying him around and hugging him and rocking him and singing to him, doing any of those things, did you?
No, but Kitty was not an affectionate person.
I understand, but I want the jurors to understand what you did see and what you didn't see, okay? So what you saw was Eric clung to her, is that right?
Yes.
He went to her a lot.
Eric was very attached to his mother, yes.
And when Lyle was a little toddler, you didn't see him go to Kitty at all. Now, when Eric was before his second birthday, we'll strike that.
Okay.
At around the time that Eric was 2, did Jose and Kitty Menendez leave Hinsdale and move to Muncie, New York?
Yes, they did.
And at this age, when Eric was around 2, was he still clinging to his mother, going to her for affection?
It was less than that. It was the summer of 1972.
So he was only a year and a half.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And this is the same age we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. And when he was at that age, did Kitty Menendez leave Hinsdale and go to New York to try to find a house?
Yes, she did.
And did she leave Eric behind with you?
She left Eric behind with me.
And how did Eric behave after his mother had left him behind with you?
Overall.
Eric was devastated.
How do you know that?
Well,
and how did he act? I told you that.
Okay. First of all, the pattern that he did about coming from his house to mine with a smile in his face to eat crackers at 7:00 in the morning was then reversed one day only. Okay. I found him in his doorstep crying.
At his house?
At his house. He was very attached to my husband. And Carlos would have to come home from work and be the one bathing him and dressing him because he wanted at that moment nobody else to touch him. He was that devastated.
Did he cry a lot?
He cried continuously. I called her, and they came back for him.
Do you know how long it was between the time they left him with you and when they came back?
Only a week.
But
A
for
week,
that,
because I couldn't, he was in too much pain.
for that entire week, he cried.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned when Miss Lansing was talking to you that Kitty thought you were overprotective in the way that you parented your children.
Mm-hmm.
Were
She did.
you?
I don't think so, but sometimes you have ideas of yourself that are not accurate.
And did you think, and do you think it's necessary for parents to protect children?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Did you discuss with Kitty Menendez your notion that children should be protected from fearful things, from dangerous things?
Objection asked.
Overall.
Okay. Yes, we discussed that. We discussed her opinion of what it was to raise, how she wanted to raise her children.
All right,
and
this has been asked and answered. Go on to something
Okay.
else.
Okay. Now, you've told us about an incident when your eldest daughter, Sylvia, went to your brother's house because there was this was an electrical storm that had knocked out the power.
Oh, yes.
And this was nighttime.
It was around 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
It was dark.
It's dark because in the wintertime at 5 o'clock it's dark, at least in the East Coast.
So Eric was home alone in the dark during this storm.
He had been left alone for a few hours, yes.
And when you indicated that Kitty got very upset when she discovered that Sylvia had gone over there, that Eric had called.
Yes.
And did she explain why she was so upset?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Had you ever said to Kitty Menendez that you did not think it was right for her to leave Eric alone in the house?
Objection irrelevant.
Overall.
I didn't have to because...
All right, you've answered the question.
You'd never said it to her?
No.
Did you have a discussion about leaving children alone
Yes.
in the house? And in the course of that discussion, did you...
She knew how strongly I felt
about not leaving children
about
alone?
not leaving an unattended child, regardless of the age.
You told us that after Jose and Kitty moved to California, Kitty would call you at approximately 4 o'clock California time every single day.
That is true.
And you would talk to her every single day for about how long?
An hour and a half.
Did she tell you during any of these phone calls about how she had gone to New York and searched for Jose's mistress, Louise?
I was completely unaware of that.
Did she tell you that she had caught Jose in a 6-year-long affair?
Objection, Your Honor. This calls for reversal.
It's
Sustained.
not being offered for truth, Your Honor.
That's irrelevant.
Objection sustained.
Did Kitty tell you her secrets?
I don't think so.
Did you know before she died that she had been in therapy for almost 3 years?
Your Honor, this also calls for hearsay and is irrelevant.
Overruled. Your answer?
No, I did not know.
Okay.
Did you know before recently that Eric had suffered from learning disabilities when he was in school?
Your Honor, this is irrelevant, whether or not she knows.
Now let me,
Objection overruled. You can answer the question.
No, I did not know.
All right, your next question, please.
did you know that Eric, the summer before they moved to California, attended a school for learning disabled called the Lewis School?
No, I didn't know, which bothered me. Not
Okay,
be-
wait. You have to wait for another question.
Now,
No, I didn't know is the answer.
No,
The
I
rest is
didn't know.
stricken.
Mrs. Baralt, do you have a daughter who needed some assistance in learning in school?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Were you, when you would talk to your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, would you share with her both the good and the bad about your children?
Objection irrelevant.
Overruled.
Yes, I did. You
And-
can't hide things like that.
you didn't hide things like that. Is that right?
No, there's no shame in that.
And did
It's
you
a fact.
did you discuss openly in front of Kitty the fact that one of your children needed some learning assistance?
Sure.
But she never discussed that one of her children needed that assistance with you. Is that right?
No, she didn't.
In fact, how did she describe to you Eric's performance academically over the years?
Glowingly.
And how did she describe both Eric and Lyle's athletic performance over the years?
In the same way, but those I attended, those I saw.
So were there times when you actually saw that they didn't win every single match they ever played?
Yes, and that's all right. Yeah,
And you thought that was all right that they didn't win?
of course.
Sustain the answer straight.
Did Kitty Menendez ever tell you that she had written suicide notes and left them around for her children to find?
Sustain.
Did she ever talk to you about her thoughts of suicide?
Overall.
No, I did not know.
Did you know before she died that there was even a hospitalization that looked like a suicide attempt?
Rephrase the question.
Yes. Did you learn before she died that she had been taken to a hospital for an overdose?
No.
Do you think you were the closest person to her?
Objection calls for speculation like a foundation.
Overall, you can answer.
I'd like to think that we were close.
Did you know anyone that she spoke to as extensively or as frequently as you?
Objection like a foundation.
Overall.
I knew that she had discussed some of the learning problems with Faith Goldsmith.
When did you know that?
Recently?
Okay, but we got to go back in time to not what you learned. You learned a lot of things after they died that you didn't know.
Yes.
Is that correct?
And I wish I had known more. I could have helped.
Yes.
All right, let's ask a question, please.
Did Kitty complain to you about her missed career opportunities because she had children?
Objection irrelevant.
Objection sustained.
Did she express to you the desire that she would have preferred having girls to boy children?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Or did you ever hear her say that in front of the boys?
No, not in front of the boys.
And finally, I wanted to show you some photographs that I've, with the court's permission, marked 209 and 210. I'm going to ask you, first of all, do you recognize the people in these photographs?
Those are Lyle and Eric.
And do you recognize the place where the photographs are taken?
I can tell you when they were taken. It was Easter Sunday in front of St. Paul's after the Mass was over.
And St. Paul's is a Catholic church.
It's a Catholic church in Nassau, on Nassau Street in Princeton.
And if I were to tell you that, and I will connect it later, that the notations on the original of this photograph indicates April 1978, does that appear right based on how the boys look in these pictures?
Yes, that's about the, that was the year they moved to Princeton.
Okay. They moved to the...
From Muncie, well, they moved from Muncie to the Princeton area, and I think that was the first Easter that we had there.
That you had there together in the Princeton area.
In the Princeton area. Correction, the first Easter was in 1977. I think this one was 1978.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Do you recall telling me 2 years ago
Okay.
that they moved to the Princeton area in August of 1977?
Yes, because
So-
Eric went to school in the West Windsor area that September.
So
And that was-
April of 1978, after changing the year, would be the first Easter, wouldn't it?
No, Because I moved in, yes, you're right.
Okay.
Because I moved in the summer of 77. That's
Okay.
true. You're correct.
Thank you, Mrs. Baralt, for having me.
Yes.
Mrs. Baralt,
Yes.
drawing your attention to the two photographs which have just been placed up here,
Of course.
210 and 209. I believe you indicated they were taken in front of a church. Is that correct?
Yes,
Did the family attend the church on the day that these photographs were taken?
we all did.
All right. Was it usual that the family attended church on occasion?
Well, we attended Easter Sunday always together.
When you say we, who's we?
We, it's my husband, my children, Jose, Kitty, and the boys.
And that was Catholic church. Is that
That was
correct?
Catholic church. That was at 11:30 Mass, and then we went for breakfast.
Aside from Easter Sunday, did you go to any other church services with your brother and his family?
Not normally.
But it was a tradition that you attended church on Easter.
On Easter Sunday, yes, all of us together.
Do you know whether or not the defendants were baptized?
Yes, they were. I'm Lyle's godmother.
All right. And do you know whether or not they received their first communion?
Yes, they did.
Now, was your sister-in-law, you knew her as Kitty, is that correct?
I knew her as Kitty, yes.
All right. Was your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, did she raise her sons in the Catholic faith?
Yes, she did.
I take it, was your family Catholic as well?
Yes, and so was hers.
Before testifying today, did you have any meetings with the defense in this case?
Oh, we've had a lot of meetings. These children have been in jail for over 3 years, and they're like my kids. Of course we have.
You love them very much, don't you?
I do love them, yes.
Have
I
you,
loved Jose and Kitty too.
Well, have you heard some of the things that have been said about your brother since the defense case started?
Yes.
All right, the objection is withdrawn.
Can you say anything nice about your brother,
I
Jose?
can say a lot of very nice things.
Did your brother Jose ever do anything nice for another human being?
I think so. I think this is a tremendous tragedy, and the tragedy is that these children love the parents. Something went definitely wrong in there.
Okay, but no, Mrs.
Okay,
Baralt,
go ahead.
did you ever see your brother do anything nice for his children?
Yes.
Okay, could you give me an example?
Okay, I'll give you an example. When Lyle broke his collarbone, okay, he was playing soccer. And it resumed. The child went down and he stayed down. Jose was beside himself. He stopped the game because everybody continued. And this happened in the course of a game. It was not like the game stopped and then they resumed. Nobody saw him. They saw him go down and stay down. He said to me, if Lyle is down and has not gotten up, he has to be very hurt. And he just interrupted that game and pulled him out. Sure enough, Lyle had a broken collarbone.
Did he take him for treatment?
Oh, immediately.
Did your brother love his sons?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
I think he did. Yes, you can love somebody and still hurt them, you know.
Okay, but it appeared to you that he loved his sons?
I think so, yes.
Did you love your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez?
I love them both.
Okay. Was Kitty fun to be around?
Tremendously.
Okay, why was she fun to be around?
Okay. Kitty was very bright. She was, whenever you had them, and wherever, in a party, in a house, in a reunion, just sitting around the kitchen table, okay? There was, what can I say? There was never, you know how sometimes you're in a group of people and the conversation kind of dies? With them, that never happened.
Would you say they were lively?
Very lively. Jose could come home from the office, and normally somebody would come from the office and say, how was your day? So, oh, another day. Or it was like a soap. I mean, he always had something to say about his day.
Did he ever use his day as entertainment for other people?
Definitely. I mean, his anecdotes, he could relate a story like nobody else.
I believe you indicated that on occasion, Jose could look at a person and make them feel terrible. Did you ever see him make other people laugh?
All the time. He was a very charismatic individual. okay? He was a lot of fun to be with, and if he liked you, he could be fantastic. If he didn't like you,
Did you ever see him around people that he appeared to like?
of course,
He liked you?
I think we had a very close, good relationship, yes.
Did your brother Jose Menendez want his sons to do better than he had done?
Clarify that for me.
Well, did he
What
want
do you mean?
did he want the best for his sons?
He wanted the best for his son, and he overlooked the fact that he was a self-driven individual. You can't make somebody else be what you want them to be. They have to want it themselves.
He was very driven.
He was a very driven, successful person. Yes.
And he was a successful businessman.
Yes, he was.
Now, you said that your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, liked to go shopping.
Yes.
Did your brother-in-law, did your brother make a lot of money? Did Jose make?
Jose made a lot of money, and he never held it back from Kitty. What I mean, the paycheck went into the account, and she spent it.
All right.
It's the same in my house.
Pardon me?
It's the same in my house.
Okay, you get to spend your husband's money too. Okay. When you moved to Chicago, was there some sort of an employment relationship between your husband and Mr. Menendez?
Yes. When Jose went in as president of Lions Container Services, he called Carlos to go in as his vice president of administration and finance. And that's why we moved to Chicago.
So he gave your husband a job. Is that correct?
My husband had a job. Yes. My husband switched. Yes.
Right. I mean, he gave him a different job.
Yes, a different job.
And after your brother left and went back to New York, did your husband stay on in the job that he had obtained?
No, there was a proxy files. The Japanese took over.
Okay, so you got a new job.
We both got a new job. He with Hertz in the East Coast, and we stayed with an appraisal firm in the Chicago area.
Did your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, appear to love her sons?
Yes, I think so.
Now, I take it from your testimony that she treated them very differently from the way you treated your children. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Okay. Now, you have 4 daughters.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And I believe you've indicated that on occasion, Kitty Menendez would tell you that she thought you were overprotective.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there's a difference between raising daughters and raising sons?
You see, this is why mainly sometimes we did not. I don't think basically there should be a difference, okay? But I never went go into an argument with her about that because she always would say, well, Terry, you have girls. And I thought, well, maybe there's a difference. I didn't have a boy to prove that there shouldn't have been, you know.
And she didn't have a daughter.
And she didn't have a daughter, exactly.
I believe you indicated that you went on vacation with the Menendez family.
Often, yes.
What kind of vacations would you go on?
Okay. When we went to Hilton Head, we rented 2 condos. They had their condo, we had ours, and we spent a week there. We did that a couple of times. We went to Canada, to Kitty's father's camp for another week there. We went to, I mean, it was different until they started making a lot of money and we couldn't afford to go in their vacations.
All right, so this would have happened what to the
until around 1970s. The last time that we went on a vacation together, Lyle was going out with Stacy because Stacy came along. So he must have been around 16.
Okay, so Stacy went on the vacation?
Yeah. Stacy, Lyle, Kitty, and I. Jose was away, and I think Eric was in camp.
All right, and where did you go on vacation then with Stacy?
We went to Hilton Head.
Were you aware that the family took other vacations in which you weren't involved?
Oh, most definitely.
What other kinds of places did they go to that you were aware of?
They went on a diving vacation in the Cayman Islands.
Do you know
And
where else?
they got certified.
And did they take their sons on that vacation?
Oh, yes.
Do you know of any other vacations they took their sons on that you were not present for?
There was one in Key West. There was, I don't know, these children were always traveling. They were traveling with them, mainly tennis, traveling related experiences.
Do you know about what age it was that the defendant started traveling for tennis? I mean, traveling further than an hour for a local match. When was it that they started traveling some distance? What ages were they?
Gosh, I would say traveling any distance, 11, 12, and teenage years, definitely.
All right,
Because
so,
I don't think Lyle started playing tennis until he was around 9 or 10.
okay, so about the ages of 11 or 12 for each of the defendants, they started to travel some distance to participate in matches. Is that correct?
And that's one of the things that Kitty and I had a disagreement on. On Thanksgiving, Jose and Lyle were never there.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
And I think Lyle resented that a little bit.
All right, but so they weren't there on Thanksgiving because they were traveling for tennis?
Eric and Kitty were always there. Jose and Lyle were always at Fort Washington for a tournament.
Okay, and where's Fort Washington?
It's like an hour and a half from us, but by the time they would get home on Thanksgiving night, he would have missed all the fun, and he resented that, I think.
Now, did you participate in family gatherings where you and your sister Marta and your brother Jose and all the kids would get together?
Yes, it wasn't very often for Martha, but yes.
Would you say that you were closer to your brother than Martha was?
Oh, there's no question about it.
Well, there's no question. What's the answer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. And for a long period of time, Martha didn't even live. She lived in Puerto Rico.
She lived in Puerto Rico, exactly.
Did you ever see your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, hit either of her children, strike them?
I didn't.
So you never saw that?
No, I did not see it.
And I believe that you've indicated that of the 29 years that
Yes.
you were, that you knew them, that you lived within 15 minutes of them for 14 and a half.
14 and a half.
And during those 14 and a half years, would you see them at least once a week, the Menendez family?
Mainly on the weekends, yes.
Okay, but then at least once a week.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I want to ask you about these incidents. What you said about 15. That's 15. 15 times.
That Eric came over to the house?
Yes.
Yes.
Was he ever injured on his trek across the grasslands to your house?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I believe you said it happened 15 times. About how old was he when it stopped?
Well, they moved out when Eric was less than 2 years old.
Okay, so it was between.
So this happened in a period of 3 months.
All right.
Okay,
So,
or 2 months, somewhere in there.
okay. Did you ever see your brother, Jose Menendez, strike either of his children?
I didn't.
I believe you indicated that Lyle Menendez spent a lot of time at your home. During
Yes.
which period of time was this?
Okay. Lyle started driving at 18, and that's when Lyle started to be free to come without having to wait for somebody to bring him. And mainly when he was at Princeton. He lived in my house. He had a room at Princeton, but he stayed at my house. I'm only 5 miles from Princeton.
So when he was at Princeton then, and he stayed at your house, would he stay there, 4 or 5 nights out of the week or more?
Every day. He lived there. He had a room.
Okay, when Donovan Goodrow was his friend, did Donovan also live with you?
Donovan stayed there 90% of the time.
All right, so Lyle Menendez was welcome in your home, is that correct?
I loved having him there.
Was his brother Eric also welcome in your home?
Eric was in California.
But he would have been welcome in your home?
He would have been welcome, yes.
Would you say you have a close relationship with your nephew, Lyle Menendez?
I think so.
When Lyle Menendez was a student at Princeton University, were you aware that he left the university for a period of about a year?
Yes, I did.
Were his parents upset about that?
Overall.
Also calls for future.
His parents were upset.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
It should be heard.
Under 1250, Your Honor.
Right, the objection's overruled.
Okay.
This is not received for the truth, just what was said.
Lyle was asked to leave the university?
Yes.
I also object under 402, which is not like to be heard.
Okay, you may come up here. All right, your next question, please.
Yeah. After your brother and your sister-in-law were killed, when did you come to California?
Immediately.
Was it?
We received a call from Jose's secretary somewhere close to noon, which is 9 o'clock California time.
All right, that would have been Monday, the 21st of August?
The 21st of August, and I think we came 5 o'clock flight.
So you arrived on the 21st as well, is that correct?
Yes.
And how long did you stay in California during that period of time?
We went back with the bodies for burial in the Princeton area. Everything is very confusing. I think it was either Saturday
Saturday the 26th?
Whenever the bodies left, we left. Those are times where I am not very clear. I don't remember when. I think the memorial services were either Friday. I think they were Friday. You can correct me on that because you have the dates, I'm sure. We left with the bodies, and then there were memorial services in the Princeton area, and I think burial was Monday.
So you attended the memorial service in Los Angeles?
Yes.
And did either one of the two defendants speak at that service?
I'm going to object that this is beyond the scope.
Overall.
Whether they attended the services?
No, did either one of them speak at the service in Los Angeles?
Eric did.
Okay. And the memorial service in New Jersey, did you attend that one as well?
Yes, I did.
Did either one of the defendants speak?
Lyle spoke on that one. Eric had a few things to say there as well, but it's not the main bulk of it was Lyle.
When you went back to New Jersey for the memorial service there and for burial, during that period of time, did either one of the defendants live with you?
No, I believe Lyle stayed at and I think Eric did too, at the Nassau Inn.
And the Nassau Inn is in the city of Princeton?
It's in the center of Princeton, yes.
Now, at some point, did either one of the two defendants stay with you for an extended period of time in September?
Lyle stayed in. Eric never stayed longer than 24 hours. I complained about that. I didn't know, except when he got sick. And I took him to the pediatrician. He had severe stomach pains.
That was Eric Menendez?
That was Eric. And I took him to the doctor has treated him all his life. And we took him to the hospital and had him checked. And he said at the time that it was stress.
Okay. Now, I believe you've indicated in your direct examination that Lyle always spent a lot of money. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But after his parents' death, did he
had more?
Pardon me?
He had more to spend.
Did you know he bought a Porsche?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this as improper, given previous rulings of this court.
Excuse me, I
Well,
believe.
this was brought out by the
Brought out
examination of this witness. So.
No, and I'd like to be heard.
Yes.
Okay, you may. And before I do that, let me ask counsel, after this witness has been completed, you'll have other witnesses tomorrow morning at 9? Okay. All right, there is some brief matters that the lawyers and I want to discuss further with this witness and discuss among ourselves, and we'll do that now, and we'll resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I'll ask that both juries return at 9 o'clock and remind you not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about the matter, and we'll see everybody back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. All right, I believe all the jurors have left, although I haven't received notice from the bailiff. I think they have. You had some questions that you wanted to ask of this witness. Did you want to do that now?
Certainly.
Okay.
Mrs. Baralt, were Jose Menendez and Kitty Menendez upset about the fact that Lyle had been asked to leave Princeton?
You know, yes, there were, but I was amazed. Jose was the one who came over to the East Coast, and I was expecting him to rave and rant. he took Lyle, and I gave them privacy. I think their parent is entitled to have privacy with their kid, especially on something like that. And they discussed it, like what happened and what was the next step. But I imagine, yes, that of course they were upset.
Well, I'm going to object to what Ms. Emmanuel described.
All right, that part of the answer is correct.
So you were aware that your brother was on the East Coast because of the fact that Lyle had been asked to leave Princeton?
We called him.
Who called him?
We did.
Who's we?
My husband and I.
You called.
Lyle came over to my house.
Did he tell you what had happened?
Yes.
And you are the one that informed him?
Well, no. We said Lyle, I think, because he didn't think it was that big a deal.
Who?
Lyle didn't think that it was that big a deal because when it happened, it was not done. He didn't do it to cheat. He had done it with permission. The only thing he overstepped. Okay. And he came and told us the story. We were sitting at dinner time. And I said, Lyle, I mean, you have to tell your parents this is a little more serious than you really think. And that's when we called his father, Carlos called his father, more or less explained to him and put Lyle on the phone.
Now, had he already had a hearing where he'd been asked?
No.
Okay, so this is.
Now, this is what he had been called by the dean and said, these charges have been brought, about that. And a complaint has been by one of the TAs have been lodged against you.
Did it appear to you that Lyle told you about what had happened relatively soon after he had found out?
That day.
Okay, and then it was that night that your husband called brother?
We called together. Let me put it this way. Okay.
And then at some point your brother came back.
Immediately. I think it was the next day or immediately.
Do you know how long after that it was that the school decided that he should leave?
This was, if I am correct, this was sometime in December. I may be wrong on that date because I don't remember too well about that. And it was not a long period of time. I would say a week or so.
Okay. And then you've indicated that your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, used to call you every night at 7 o'clock during dinner.
While Lyle was in school.
Okay, now was this before before he was asked to leave or when he had returned?
When he had returned. This was the spring of 1989.
And so it was at that time that the telephone call started from your sister-in-law?
Yes.
Okay. Were you ever aware of the fact that your sister-in-law knew about what had happened with Lyle at Princeton? In other words, did she ever say anything to you about it?
We talked about it, but very lightly. It was something that happened. And
all right, so you actually spoke with your sister-in-law?
Yes, I did.
About the fact that Lyle had been asked to leave Princeton for.
Well, when we made that call to Jose, it was at home, and it was two parents talking to two parents and a kid there.
And she was on the phone as well?
Well, I wasn't even on the phone myself. I was listening to one side of the conversation. Okay, I'm sure the conversation took place between Lyle and his father and Carlos and Jose.
Right. But did you personally ever speak to your sister-in-law about?
Yes, we talked about it. She was upset about it, disappointed. But what do you do? I mean.
When she called you every night at 7 o'clock when the spring semester started in 1989.
Yes.
Was she concerned about Lyle?
Kitty didn't call me because she said, I am concerned about Lyle. Kitty called me and we talked about the Calabasas house being redone, about daily life. Never mentioned to me that all the problems that they were having, never hinted that there was any problem. She just wanted to know how Lyle was doing, how is Lyle, how is school. And Kitty had a way of extracting information from you. I mean, she was difficult to say. It's not like if you tell me I don't want to talk about it or I don't want to say, I drop it. Not Kitty.
So she would make inquiries about her son when she called you?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I thought that the purpose of the 402 was with regard to the leaving Princeton issue. We're now into the spring of '89, which is.
Yes.
Well, I'm trying to show a connection between the two events, Your Honor. I just have one more question. In the in the fall of '87, when Lyle started his freshman year at prison,
Yeah.
did she call you every night?
No.
Okay, that's all.
All right, any examination on that limited subject?
No, Your Honor.
I would like to, I know it's none of my business. Well, let me suggest the data.
All right, you want to confer about this?
No, I just want to make sure none of this happens in front of my jury, that's all.
Well, that's something that you can address to the court, not to Ms. Lansing.
No, I know, I was asking, suggesting if she wants to deal with it a different way, so that just reinforces that separate and equal.
All right,
Which is
any
how I feel on this
questions
issue.
on the subject? All right. All right, we'll also have the reporter find reference in the direct testimony regarding that one subject. Reporters can confer. I don't know which one took down that particular area, and we'll discuss that tomorrow morning. Yeah, at the sidebar, when the other reporter was present, there was a discussion regarding what specific questions were asked by the defense, specifically Ms. Lansing, on direct examination regarding spending by Lyle Menendez before and after the killing of the parents. All right, you may step down, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 9.
Thank you.
Thank you. And in regards to scheduling, by the way, there has been inquiry by members of the Lyle Menendez jury as to whether counsel feel, well, it's not addressed to counsel, it's just unaddressed, actually. The inquiry is whether or not we're still on schedule here in regards to when the juries can expect to begin their deliberations. So you can just think about that, and we'll discuss that tomorrow morning as well. Yeah, well, I just want, again, after you confer further on witnesses, perhaps tomorrow morning, you can give me a specific indication of when you think both sides will rest and the case will be argued to the juries. I know you gave me an estimate about a week ago, and perhaps we can, or even earlier this term, it was last week. You give me an update tomorrow after you confer further on which witnesses you intend to call. And we'll inform both juries since they certainly have a right to know. Any other matters now before we take our break for the afternoon? Again, the witnesses for tomorrow, other than the Whalens, are who?
I just gave Mr. Kuriyama a list. Mr. Kuriyama, would you read the list? But there's Barbara Zussman, Casey Whalen, Kathy Cohen, which is Casey's mother, Chris Somrod, Peter Connell, Janet Stoltzfus, and possibly Norman Coles, which will coordinate with him.
Who?
Norman Coles, P-U-L-S.
Okay, are there any issues to be litigated before any of these witnesses testify?
I'll talk to Ms. Morrissey.
Are these in front of one jury or both?
Some are in front of both, some are in front of just Eric's.
All right. If there are any issues that have to be litigated regarding any of these witnesses, I'd ask that you let me know that tomorrow morning as well when we confer regarding the schedule. All right, we'll be in recess then until tomorrow at 9 o'clock.